Never played for Carlisle again, and his playing career never really kicked on after that defining moment. He took on various jobs outside of football before finding his way back into the sport as player liaison officer at Eddie Howe's Bournemouth, and most recently the general manager at non-league Wimborne. Not the fairy tale ending to one of the most Hollywood moments in football, but the name Jimmy Glass will live on forever as the scorer of that.
Welcome one, welcome all to this Sunday night's edition of Trans Europe Express, your weekly dose, I suppose I'd put it, of European football and football from beyond, of course. We'll be talking about South America and Africa as well as the AFCON reaches its semi-final stages. I'm Danny Kelly. With me for the next 3 hours, I'm delighted to say the man without whom, etc., Andy Brassell. And we'll also be bringing you a live simulcast from the game as the wildcard playoff matches are up and running in the NFL. You can hear all those over on TalkSport 2. We'll be bringing you a little bit of the live action from the game between San Francisco 49ers and the current champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. All of that, plus a whole lot of other stuff that you know you're going to hear here, including big stories more around the continent. Mbappe Watch is the El Classico edition. Reaction when it ends to that huge game between Inter Milan and Napoli at the top of Serie A. Tim Vickery will join us, as I say, from Brazil, and Tony Afoki will join us from Morocco. Welcome one, willkommen all, and all, falcha, as I always say in Irish, to every one of you, to Trans Europe Express. Hey Andy, how are you?
Hello Danny, I'm well, yourself?
Very, very good. I'm just watching again. Remember I told you during the warm-up that yesterday evening we had the first three of the playoff games in the NFL, and between the three high-scoring games, the total number of points between the teams was 9, because parity kicking in now and all the teams are equally good. The NFL's having an amazing... There's a minute to go in the game in Jacksonville, and there's 3 points in that as well.
Oof.
Yeah, I know. It's been fantastic. Let's start, though, with another game of importance played overseas. Has the game... well, I should do this properly. It's time now, for regular listeners will know what I'm going to say next, for this.
Sa carrière, le Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappé! Mbappé! Little give and go, Mbappe's in! Oh, it's 2-2! He scored twice in 2 minutes! Tête de qui Mbappé? Allez, Kylian!
Yeah, the best laid plans of mice, men and broadcasters. We put Mbappe Watch first here because we blithely assumed that the Spanish Super Cup final in Saudi Arabia would be over between Barcelona and Real Madrid, a Classico. But Andy, we're heading as always now with a big match.
And now it is. It is, finally.
Another 100-minute match, of course.
It ended in incredibly dramatic fashion. Barcelona 3, Real Madrid 2. So the 5th time that Barcelona have beaten Real Madrid in the last 6 editions of El Clasico, the exception being the one in La Liga earlier this season at the Bernabeu. So Barcelona are celebrating on the pitch, and well they might, because they had a bit of a squeaky bum ending there, it's fair to say. Firstly, in the 90th minute, we had Frenkie de Jong sent off a really horrible foul on Kylian Mbappe, who wasn't fit enough to start, but came off the bench with about 15 minutes to go. And so after de Jong went, Real Madrid really laid siege to the Barcelona goal, and 2 of the clearest chances ever to equalise that you will see within the space of about a minute and a half. The problem was they both fell to defenders. Firstly, Antonio Carreras, who put it straight at Thibaut Courtois, and then from even closer in, Raul Asensio, who put it straight at Thibaut Courtois. And immediately after that, final whistle.
What do we make of it, Andy? Confirmation, if we needed it, that despite being a slightly flawed team, as I keep saying, of course, I will be eating a massive portion of humble pie with a side salad of crow when Barcelona win the Champions League. Despite their to me, evident deficiencies, Barcelona really have got the hoodoo over Real Madrid these days.
Yeah, well, like we said, 5 and 6 in this fixture. And really, that's how Barcelona sort of grappled themselves back to relevance. You know, when it looked like Real Madrid were on the cusp of a dynasty, Barcelona handed out a couple of, at the time, kind of meaningless thrashings to Real Madrid. Of course, it's never really meaningless in El Clasico, but in terms of turning the trophy tide, it wasn't doing anything. Really, that's how they built their confidence to get themselves into the place they are now. Now, of course, various things have had to go wrong for Real Madrid as well. But I suspect Real Madrid will have a similar feeling from this game that they had from the Copa del Rey final, also 3-2 to Barcelona, that after extra time, that they had last year under Carlo Ancelotti, because Real Madrid couldn't really have played any better in that. And whereas they might have been a little bit second best in this, I don't think there was an enormous gap. They created plenty in this. We had a really good Vinicius scoring his first goal in 16 games. Can you believe,
a goal!
In the first half?
If you're going to become an occasional goal scorer, make sure they're memorable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. So if we go back and briefly do the tail of the tape, Rafinha missed the sitter and then scored a brilliant opener. Equaliser, 2 minutes into first half stoppage time for Vinicius. Then Robert Lewandowski went up the other end and put them straight back in front. And there was still time for Gonzalo Garcia to equalise before half time, which all gave way to another Rafinha goal, a rather more scruffy one. He was slipping over as he hit it, and it took a big deflection off Raul Asensio to go in to decide the match in the second half. And maybe Barcelona just squeaked it, but I felt that if we feel that there's generally a big gap between Barcelona and Real Madrid at the moment, it didn't show in this game. And I think, people talked before this Supercopa, because of course there were the semi-finals during the week where Barcelona absolutely blitzed Athletic 5-0, again inspired by Rafinha. He got a couple in that as well. And then a rather more skinny 2-1 win for Real Madrid against Atletico in the other semi-final. I think if we thought there was a massive gap between those two, it didn't feel evident tonight. And funnily enough, I think if we look at a couple of the big recent defeats for Real Madrid, and you think of that one against Manchester City in the Champions League, they've come out of it with a lot of credit. I'm not sure you can often say that for Real Madrid, because normally when Real Madrid lose, that's the story. You can't make any excuses. You can't have any context. But in the last couple of months, it's felt that actually we can. And even going out to this Supercopa in Saudi Arabia, it felt as if Xavi Alonso was really under the pump, where I think it feels a little less so now.
Yeah, and I think as well, I mean, people get injuries, and we're seeing from the Premier League the amount of games and the intensity of the games that people are being asked to play means that many clubs have got massive injury lists. They almost need to have a hospital rather than a training ground. But Mbappe, the 10 minutes here are significant, Andy, because if Real Madrid are going to make an attack on Barcelona's lead in Spain and, of course, the Champions League, they need him coming into form in this second half of the season. So it was good to see that the fella's very physical and he doesn't back down, so he gets injured. And it's good to see him back, because you always wonder whether it's going to be longer than they say, but sure enough, it was about 3 weeks, and here he is back.
Yeah, I mean, he's arrived in less than that, really, time-wise. He's done pretty well. I mean, they said he was going to be out for 3 weeks around New Year. We're now on January the 11th, and if they'd have really needed him on Wednesday in the semi-final, it felt like he would have played as well. I mean, always the question was when this news came out, this is the bit that could torpedo Real Madrid's season, as we said last week, because there was the feeling that they'd just been so dependent on the best Kylian Mbappe in a couple of years in the first half of the season. But in fact, they found Gonzalo Garcia could step in and do a really good job. Of course, he hit that hat-trick against Betis at this time last week. And so, really, despite the fact that, you know, they haven't come away from Saudi with the Super Coppa, and that will be a frustration for them, I think in terms of the overall shape they're in better shape now than we could have imagined on 1st of January.
Yeah, we'll be talking about another reserve centre forward when we get on to talking about France a little later on, who's also tearing things up. And Barcelona, Andy, forgive my occasional bouts of doubts about them, but while they've got... They're rarely, I think, for a Barcelona side, you know, since their great side of a decade and a bit ago, they have at times been less than the sum of the parts. If it's... the credit here to Hansi Flick is that they are more than the sum of the parts currently.
They are, and I think when we look back to the early part of this season, where it looked as if their high line was going to fatally prejudice them, it looked as if they'd been really found out, and teams were finding a way to attack them very effectively. By leaving one player like quite a long way offside and then having other players attack from deep when Barca thought they were safe. They seem to have got over that. You know, they're on an incredible run of wins at the moment. And, you know, they're in a really great position. Now, funnily enough, they didn't start the season as well as they could have. And also, they haven't started the Champions League as well as they could have. They were untouchable in the league stage of the Champions League last season. Not so much so in this season's Champions League. But, of course, it's all about peaking at the right time.
Listen, thank you very much indeed for that. Let me just tell you that later on the programme we'll be having 15 minutes dedicated to your questions. Andy will attempt to answer them. I will jog along behind, as always. If you've got questions for anything to do with European football, not just the transfer window, because we're going to cover that separately, but just, you know, what he fancies in various leagues and stuff you want to talk about, players, the World Cup, all the rest of it. Then that number is 81089. You can text us here at TalkSport on 81089. Get your questions in for Andy. I should tell you, Andy, I know people go mad when I go about the American football, but we're into the guts of it here. And, of course, it's massive coverage of it over on TalkSport too as we speak. That game has ended, Andy, with a score. The Buffalo Bills have beaten the Jaguars by 27 points to 24. Earlier today, in the previous game today, the Packers lost to the Bears by 27-31. So big scores in these games. And now the 5 games so far in the playoffs, the margin between the winning and losing teams, 16 points. This is an incredibly equal season. That's why I can't pick a winner. And when I was asked to do so by the NFL for one of their websites, because they know I know a little bit about it, I said, in years when you can't find the winner, go for the best defence. And therefore, I've gone for the Houston Texans. I'm going to look a fool when they get turned over tomorrow night. Listen, thank you all for listening to us for the first 15 minutes. Following Mbappe Watch, we'll be turning our attention to everything that's been going on in Germany, where... this is an oddity for you. Bayern Munich ran up a cricket score. Lazy old Harry Kane only managed one. That's next here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, I perhaps should have mentioned this when we were talking about Kylian Mbappe during Mbappe Watch. Our poll tonight is, I think it's going to cause consternation. Who is currently, right now, the best player in Europe? The four names we put in are Kylian Mbappe, Lamine Yamal, both of whom played in that Classico in Saudi Arabia in the last few minutes, Harry Kane, or Declan Rice. Those are our list of the best. Yes, I know. Start texting immediately. What about Eric Dyer and all the rest of it? It's Mbappe, Yamal, Kane, or Declan Rice. Get your voting out there. It's a Twitter poll, so you go to X at TalkSport, at Danny Kelly Words, or at Andy Brassell, 2 S's and 2 L's, and you'll get your chance to vote in that poll. I think it should be a good one. Yes, I think that's what I wanted to say. Next up, Andy, we're going to talk about Germany, where our headline is Bayern batter bunnies, because they always beat Wolfsburg. But I must admit, I didn't watch this game today. I had an eye on the scores, and at one stage it was 1-1, and then it was 2-1 to Bayern. And I thought, OK, this is the standard procedure. Tell me what the final score was.
8-1 at full time.
Oh, my
Danny.
Goodness.
Yeah, it really was something. And as you say, it was 2-1 at half time. Bayern had taken an early lead and Wolfsburg responded pretty well. But of course, we should know our history in this fixture. Wolfsburg are Bayern's bunnies and have been for a long time. I think it was funny that one of the most famous Wolfsburg-Bayern games we think of is the one where Wolfsburg beat them 5-1 on the way to the 2009 title, where Grafich did that incredible dribble and then backheeled it in. But that's one of only 3 times they've ever beaten them in the Bundesliga in 50 plus games. So that's pretty much the one-off. Now,
so even in all those in all those years when Wolfgang Wolf was Wolfsburg's coach, they still couldn't beat Bayern Munich, yeah?
I think you've added a superfluous sentence for your own amusement there. And I
never forget Wolfgang Wolf. Never forget him.
Exactly.
Andy, there's been a goal in Italy that I think you'll want to describe to us.
Yeah, it's a big one. Inter have retaken the lead against Napoli in the 73rd minute. Inter 2, Napoli 1. Now, of course, Hakan Çalhanoğlu missed a penalty in this fixture last season. The first penalty he ever missed for Inter. He's not missed this one. He hit the post in this fixture last season, about 14 months ago. This time under Christian Kivu. He's put it in off the inside of the post. He sent Vanja Milinkovic-Savic the wrong way. I suspect his heart was in his mouth for a second when he heard that clang of aluminium, or a half second. But it's 2-1 now to Inter. Scott McTominay had equalised in the first half after an early goal by
Producer is telling me that one of the people who didn't see that penalty going is Antonio Conte, who's been sent off. Surprise.
His team were quite unhappy about the award as well. But this is a goal that could really matter, because should Inter beat the reigning champions, not only is that a notable scalp in itself, but Inter, who we've always argued, well, for the last couple of seasons, haven't we, Danny, that Inter are player for player the best team in Serie A. Well, they'll be going 5 points clear at the top if this result holds.
Yeah, and if that held over the rest of the season, as we talked about, the most competitive league in Europe would have yet another new champion. No one ever retains the title in Italy since Juventus's great streak was broken. Back to Bayern Munich, 8-1. And only 1 goal for Harry Kane.
Which is remarkable, really,
because he's still very much on target to break Lewandowski's single-season record, isn't he?
Yeah, that's right. It's his 20th league goal he scored, even if it was completely, talking of superfluous, a little bit in that direction. It was number 6, but it was his 20th league goal of the season. Great finish, and one that really mattered to him personally. But it's interesting because you wondered before this game, would he feast? Because, as we say, Bayern love to play Wolfsburg. It's not a particularly great Wolfsburg team at the moment. And, of course, there's the fact that if we go back to 2015, when Pep Guardiola was still the coach, this was the fixture in which, at the Allianz Arena, in which Robert Lewandowski came on as sub at half-time and scored 5 goals in 9 minutes. Now, knowing that Kane likes to chase Lewandowski's records, I was sort of sitting there last week idly thinking, I wonder if he gets a hat-trick, is he really going to go for it? Is he really going to go for it from there? And, of course, it didn't matter, either to Bayern or presumably to Kane, because there was an assist for him as well, and it looked like he was really enjoying himself.
in our ever busy, I mean, sometimes over busy Trans-Europe Express WhatsApp group, responding to the news that Antonio Conte had been sent off, our great friend Daniele Fisichella, of course, speaks fluent. He parla Italiano, says he was on the touchline shouting, shame on you, after the penalty was given, impugning the referee and the officials, and for that he's been shown the red card. Andy, I want to talk about Stuttgart because they're not a name that comes up very often in our coverage of the Bundesliga, but their result this weekend shows, and the position they're attaining in the Bundesliga, shows that perhaps we are guilty of underrating them.
Yeah, that's right, Danny. And bear in mind that they are like the best coach team in the Bundesliga. I don't have any doubt about that. Sebastian Hoeneß, of course, nephew of Uli, son of Dieter.
With obvious long-term consequences.
But possibly. He's terrific. He has turned Stuttgart from strugglers into consistent Bayern botherers at the top of the table on a fraction of the budget. And when you look at a team that goes from nothing to second, like they went from relegation playoff to second and therefore to the Champions League. They've also won the Cup under him. You normally think, well, he'll sort out the defence and they'll just play on the break. But they never did. They took 65% of the possession in all these games, and they played like swaggering bosses. And I really like that about Hoeneß and his Stuttgart team. Now, again, they lost some big players in the summer, of course, notably Nick Woltemade, who definitely wasn't going until the minute that he went. Yeah. And that they weren't really able to replace him. Soon after that, Deniz Undav, who was the replacement within the squad, he tore a hamstring. And yet here they are, after going to Leverkusen and winning 4-1 there yesterday. They were 4-0 up at half-time. They are in fifth place still, but they're equal on points with Leverkusen. And, of course, they've closed up the goal difference on them. Leverkusen still have a better goal difference, but not by nearly as much now after that big old thrashing. And it's interesting because there are 7 players who are German internationals in the 11 that started for Stuttgart yesterday. And what a moment to show out with Rudi Völler, who, of course, was connected with Bayer Leverkusen for ages, lives just up the road, is now the technical director of the DFB. What a great afternoon to state your case, and none more so than Jamie Leveling, who
tell us about
twice.
Leveling, because, he's a young German player. He's a winger, I think. Is he? You can tell me about him because because the Premier League, with their almost bottomless resources, are starting to fling some of those resources in his direction.
Well, yeah, there's already been a 40 million offer from Bournemouth for Jamie Leveling in this window, and Stuttgart rejected it out of hand because their thinking is, well, if he keeps on playing like this and he goes to the World Cup and plays well, we can sell him for whatever we like. And bear in mind that they held on to the balloon for longer than a lot of people thought wise for Nick Woltemade. Bear in mind, it took real guts to turn down a 50 million offer from Bayern for Woltemade when they got him for nothing the previous summer. But they thought, hang on, they can do better than this, or someone can do better than this. And they ended up selling Woltemade for, 80 million euros. So obviously that's been reported as slightly higher in the German media as it has in the English media at the time. But nevertheless, they made a humongous profit. They feel they can do the same with Leveling. And of course, him hoping to get in the German World Cup squad and feeling that he can get a massive move if he holds on a little longer and he has a pick of some more clubs in the summer. He won't be banging on the manager's door to leave either.
I only gasped when you said about the 40 million. We know that Bournemouth are well back these days, but I remember in the 1990s, I was down on the South Coast doing some story for the music press, and Bournemouth were playing that evening. I thought, why not? I'm in the town, and I can't even remember what it was now, but it was a nighttime game at Dean Court, and I suppose I was in a crowd of less than 4,000, felt like 3,000, and now they're bidding £40 million for footballers. I know the world changes all the time, but sometimes it does take your breath away how the Premier League has transformed English football, and of course, for better or worse, overseas ownership. of the clubs in the Premier League has transformed the landscape. The other game I want to talk about, Andy, is what looks like a very exciting game, not one for the coaches, but one for the fans. Frankfurt 3, Dortmund 3, which is the Friday night game. Some of you may have seen it now that those Friday night games are widely available in the UK. And a game, I suppose, Andy, where you tell me that both sides showed both their excellence and the reasons why they're not top of the table.
That's exactly it, Danny. Neither of them will quite get to where they want to go, although they'll entertain us plenty in the meantime this season, I think. Now, Eintracht Frankfurt, we know they can score goals. We also know their defence is epically bad. This is a game that Dortmund should have won, which is exactly their problem. That they led twice, and then having conceded an equaliser, they went behind in the second minute of stoppage time, and you thought they're in big trouble here. And speaking of big trouble, Inter's defence is in big trouble. It's a second for Scott McTominay, 81 minutes, an equaliser for Napoli. And if we're talking about really enjoying the title race, as we always do in Serie A, I think a draw would be good for us, wouldn't it?
Yes, I mean, we can't lose, Andy. If Inter go top 5 points clear, we can say we told you Inter were the best team, as we have done many times. If it's a draw, or if Napoli win, we can say we said it was the most competitive league in Europe. We'll be right. Andy, whichever way it comes out, you and I will be looking at the back of our nails and saying, oh, yeah, don't worry about that thing. Don't worry about Trans-Europe Express. We know what we're talking about.
That's exactly it.
Most of the time. I've got to... Go on, finish.
So I guess we've got to finish talking about Dortmund. So a lot of people have interest in them.
And upcoming proponents for Spurs very, very soon, the Champions League.
Yeah, talking of unrest behind the scenes, maybe not quite the same degree of it at Dortmund, but I think the interesting thing is, and when they went behind in stoppage time, we thought they were going to fall to an undeserved defeat, but an equaliser for them by Carney Chukwuemeka, an Englishman who is really highly rated at the club. If he can get fit enough, he's going to be a huge, huge player for them. Of course, they let Pascal Gross, another of their midfielders, go in this winter window because they're just trying to get younger, quite simply.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's going under Niko Kovac, who wants you to run 20 kilometres a game, basically. So the interesting thing for them ahead of that Spurs game, though, is Kovac is going to face a decision, and he's been asked about it a lot in press conferences, about Serhou Guirassy, their ever-reliable top goal scorer, who, again, going back to Stuttgart, was a big, big signing from Stuttgart, has been brilliant in the Bundesliga over the last couple of years, but has not scored a Bundesliga goal since October now, only 5 so far this season.
And with regards to that critical upcoming Champions League game, Dortmund will have noted the return to Spurs' ranks yesterday of Dominic Solanke. Oh no, Solanke's not in Spurs' Champions League squad. Such is the chaos at the club. Yeah, I know, Andy. Cover your face and laugh because it's true. That's absolutely true. Who's your star of the week? Because I've got a belter, but who is your star of the week, Andy, in Germany?
My star of the week is Victor Boniface, who had a knee operation, which is likely to mean the end of his Werder Bremen career. Of course, he was on loan there. It was spoken about something that might save his top-level career. He's needed it for a while. He's not been himself. Of course, that move to Milan fell through in the summer before he ended up at Werder, for whom he never scored. Look, I love you, Bonnie. I just want you to get fit, and we're all behind you. Come on.
Very good. My star of the week is one of the people, whoever runs Union Berlin's social media presence. I suspect it is a 17-year-old with an asymmetric haircut. Because, Union drew 2-2 with Mainz. And after the game, Oliver Burke, the Scottish wide player who we're always touting to go to the World Cup with Scotland, Andy,
yes.
He did a rather downbeat social media statement. He said, what a frustrating game, and frustrating for the team and for me personally. But anyway, well done, the team. And within seconds, Union had come back to him and said, please don't worry. They're doing online therapy for professional footballers now, their own players. So that he's whoever he or she is that runs the social media presence for Union Berlin is my star of the week.
Danny, can I just tell you, we've got 5 minutes to go in Inter versus Napoli. Everyone at San Siro is absolutely gripped by this, not least Antonio Conte, who, as you pointed out, has been red-carded, is in with the Inter fans watching it. Wonderful.
Is he indeed? I'm sure the Italian authorities will take a very bright view of that. Listen, thank you very much indeed. Next, coming up here on Trans Europe Express, France. Yeah, Super Ali McLeod is back on TalkSport Breakfast tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. with Jeff Stelling. The guys will be reflecting on a huge weekend of FA Cup upsets, building up to the EFL Cup semi-finals, and speaking to motorsport legend 1996 Formula One world champion Damon Hill. That's TalkSport Breakfast tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. with Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist. You'll want to set your alarms for that. We'll talk about the rest of the football, Andy, in France in a little while on Trans Europe Express, but let's devote the next 10 minutes to the French Super Cup final, because it was an extraordinary game. Marseille were possibly just better than Paris Saint-Germain.
Yes.
But two things came out of the game. Paris Saint-Germain's amazing resilience and the presence in their team of world football's most influential substitute.
Yeah, they really were. Trophée des Champions game, which was played in Kuwait City this Thursday night, in an era in which Super Cups are played anywhere but in their native country.
Yes.
And it's a shame because it was such an exciting game. It was really great. And Marseille, after a week in which Roberto De Zerbi has been really battered by a lot of commentators and pundits in the French media, especially after Marseille's home loss to Nantes, which brought them back into Liga last weekend. It went pretty badly. They ended up with 9 men, couldn't close the gap at the top, and De Zerbi had his credentials questioned everywhere, really. You had the likes of Jerome Rotten and Christophe Dugarry saying, he's not made Marseille any better, he's not a winner, he's too emotional, all this sort of stuff. He's not really a top-level coach. Some really brutal stuff. And then his team turned up and showed really what they thought of him, because they went a goal down to Ousmane Dembélé, and it's a really bad goal to concede. Then they came back to lead towards the end, and they really deserved it. They really, really deserved it. They were fantastic. And as you say, what PSG had up their sleeve was Gonzalo Ramos. Now, our man PSG Lee tells us that 28% of Gonzalo Ramos's goals have been scored in the 90th minute or later. Just get your head around that.
It's extraordinary.
He is the guy who saves finals, just as he did, Danny, against Spurs in the UEFA Super Cup.
Don't worry, we'll have them next year in the Super Cup.
Yes, he did, exactly. He did it against... He did it against Lens in the Coupe de France last season when they were on the way out as well. There were so many moments in which he's really put them on the road to a trophy. And
Lee says of the last 7 trophies that Paris Saint-Germain have won, 3 of them have relied on Ramos getting late goals. Extraordinary.
It's amazing, really. And bearing in mind that people think, he's kind of wasting his time there. And actually, he's a horse for a course. He's used for a particular reason. And it's not like he's behind terrible players and he should start. I don't think he can start if he needs to. Now, you could argue that he's sacrificed something, but I think if you ask him, being decisive for a team that wins trophies, does it really get any better than that? I don't know if it does.
But let me ask you, Andy, because, amazingly, even more amazingly, he is PSG's, champions of Europe. He's their leading goal scorer, and he starts virtually every game on the bench. Is this affecting his chances of starting for Portugal, or is that being affected by Cristiano Ronaldo?
Yeah, I think that's the latter rather than the former, to be honest. Look,
because I'm sure he's an ambitious young man.
Look, I know you like to frame stuff in US sport lexicon, Danny. So can I say, if coming off the bench is good enough for Victor Wembanyama from the San Antonio Spurs, if we're putting it in a French context, it's good enough for Gonzalo Ramos. And
can I just say, come on, you Spurs, without fear of being laughed at there?
Yeah, he certainly can. They're the Spurs to be supporting at the moment.
Definitely.
And I think as well, the way that PSG have become like the Germany of club football, the way they've closed out in penalties in not only the UEFA Super Cup, but also the Intercontinental Cup. And now in this, the Trophée des Champions as well. It's remarkable, really. And when we think back to the Intercontinental Cup against Flamengo, and you had those 4 penalty saves in the shootout from Matvei Safonov, and people were saying, well, maybe this is his moment. Maybe he's going to take over from Lucas Chevalier and be the number 1 goalkeeper. Of course, he broke his hand saving one of those penalties. Yeah. And then Chevalier, who, because, as we say, Marseille were the better team, he made a load of good saves in the actual 90 minutes and then went on to save 2 in the shootout. This was his moment. He was cheered off the pitch by his fellow players and given the bumps afterwards as well. But I just think from Marseille's perspective, and from PSG's, I suppose, it's that old cliche about there's playing finals and there's winning finals, and they're there to be won, not to be played well in. I think it's fair to say. And maybe PSG had all their brilliant performances in a final rolled into one in the Champions League final, which is maybe the definitive Champions League final performance of our lifetimes. I think you could go that high, couldn't you? I think the only other one that comes close is
Milan.
Probably... Yeah, exactly. Milan against Barcelona in '94, and that was such a surprise.
But that's 2 generations ago. That's what, for younger people listening to this program. That's in black and white.
Absolutely.
Paris is the definitive Champions League final performance of the modern era, because that's not a modern era game anymore. We have to accept that, Andy.
Yeah.
I was interested to hear what you said about De Zerbi getting criticised. Tell me how you think he's doing at Marseille. I'll tell you for why. Because I know that at least one North London club thinks he might be a good manager. Though I suspect that if you cannot pour Roberto De Zerbi into an already chaotic situation. It just can't work.
When you said North London club, I thought, I mean, it has struck me as a bit weird that he's Italian and he hasn't managed Watford yet. But yeah, I don't know. That's for us, you and me. That's not really London, is it? Watford?
No.
But I think you look, despite the fact they're training neighbours to Arsenal.
I barely count Catford as Watford. as London. Go on.
But I think. That Serbi, maybe he will come back to the Premier League at some point. I
think he's a brilliant coach, Andy, but he does tend to leave a trail of dead behind him, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're starting to wonder, is he a brilliant coach for a certain level? Until he can start actually winning trophies, we can't talk about him as an elite coach. He's an elite level of fun at the moment, but I don't know, like taking Marseille to the next level is always difficult because... You know, there is a definite ceiling to what you can do in France. There's no doubt about that. But if there was ever a season where someone was going to upset PSG because of the fatigue, because of the calendar, it was going to be this one. And I think the creeping fear amongst their fans and amongst some neutrals as well is they won't be ready to receive this opportunity. I mean, I guess it would be a little bit like, you know, what Arsenal and to a lesser extent Tottenham let go in 2016 when Leicester won the Premier League. You know, you had this opportunity to win the Premier League that was maybe never going to come up again for a fair few years, and you didn't manage to take it, and it wasn't one of the other big teams that took it. So I guess that's really the question for them. But I think in terms of the way they handled this final, I mean, they were 2-1 up. They celebrated wildly like they'd already won it when William Pacho scored the own goal to make it 2-1. And then Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang went clean through. Chevalier saved from him. This was in stoppage time. And PSG literally went up the other end. Pacho clouted it the length of the pitch. And it was a real like Wimbledon in the 80s goal. Barcola knocked it down and Gonzalo Ramos let it in. And you thought, how could they have let that happen, really?
Yeah, they got caught on a counter when you're a minute away from winning a major trophy. Yeah, and that of course is one of the things that gets levelled at De Zerbi. And believe me, I don't think this is much of a criticism. That it can be a little bit too attacking. Fantastic, Andy. And also, when you say it was a real Wimbledon 1980s goal, you're not supposed to smile if you're a football aficionado. You're not supposed to grin like that, Andy. You're supposed to tut and frown like Ice Cube when you hear about Wimbledon in those days. Not rub your hands together like you're doing. Listen, thank you very much indeed for that. Next, we'll be getting an early flavour of the game from the NFL that's just started and is live over on TalkSport 2 as the playoffs are off to a brilliant start this year. And then we'll be talking about football in the rest of France. Lots to come here on Trans-Europe Express. Yeah, welcome back to Trans-Europe Express. In a little while, we'll be getting the latest from the NFL playoffs. The game at the Lincoln Financial Field there in Philadelphia, where the San Francisco 49ers are attempting to knock the current holders out of the tournament. We're into the knockout stages now. But first, Andy, let's return to talk about the rest of what's been going on in Spain, because we already talked about the Super Cuppa. You want to use the headline Matarazzo Magic, because Pellegrino Matarazzo, the new coach of Real Sociedad, is off to a pretty good start. Great first week for him.
He is, and maybe a slightly unusual pick, Danny, because he's mainly German-based, also US citizen, who we've known for coaching Stuttgart and
not a
Hoffenheim
Basque
before. And yeah, it's about bringing 3 players from the academy. You know, we celebrate the Athletic Academy because they're the most famous club, the biggest club in that region, and they take Basque players only. Not something that Real Sociedad have done since 1989, when John Aldridge came in and kind of broke that. They said they needed to do that to catch up, and so. You sort of look at it and think it is quite unusual. So he's come in and he drew the first game against Atletico Madrid, in which they played very well, particularly in the second half of that. And then they went and won away at Getafe. And, you know, you say you need to get your Premier League sea legs when you come to England for the first time. I can't think of anything that's more bracing an experience when you arrive in La Liga is going away to Getafe, where you know, if you know anything about Getafe, that Bordalas and his players are going to make it difficult for you, that the ball is probably going to be in play for about 25 minutes, all that sort of stuff. They did the right thing. They got themselves in front. They played really well. And then they conceded a 90th minute to Juanmi, one of their former players, of all the people who could have scored. But even desperately needing the points, even not having won in a while, they didn't let the heads drop, and John Aramburu got a winner from a corner in the last minute of stoppage time. Well celebrated and deserved as well. And, you know, things are looking good for them now.
Another team that are looking good is Villarreal. We'll get on to those in a second, Andy, because I just want to head over now to TalkSport 2, where, as I've been saying, the San Francisco 49ers are taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL playoff game. They're just 5 minutes or so into the first quarter. Here's your play-by-play commentary with TalkSport's very own Will Gavin.
First down if you're a Niners fan. 3 receivers split to the left at Dotson Brown and Devonta Smith. In the gun, hands the ball off again to Saquon Barkley, who makes a step out to the right hand side. Absolutely no one on that side. Malik Mustafa trying to close it down as he gets to the 35-yard line and goes out to bounds just inside the 49ers 35-yard line. As he bounced to the outside, the entire 49ers defense collapsed onto the right-hand side of the Eagles line, and Saquon Barkley had acres of space. Malik Mustafa gets across and makes what is a touchdown-saving tackle.
Yeah, Lenore didn't set the edge pretty well there, and they took advantage of it, and they hit the Niners with a pretty good yardage.
Delighted to welcome our listeners from TalkSport. Thank you for giving us a moment of your night on Trans-Euro Express as we're here at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia for a huge playoff matchup. The 2 teams who have represented the NFC the last 3 Super Bowls in the Eagles and the 49ers. Early doors, DeMarcus Robinson with the receiving touchdown from the 2-yard line for the 49ers. And now the first drive for the Eagles, they're down to the 32-yard line of San Francisco. 1st and 10 from there. Jalen Hurts in the gun, gives it to Barkley again. 3rd run for him, makes one cut inside and is wrapped up by Bryce Huff for about a 2-yard gain. Matt Pryor is into the game for Fred Johnson. So it looks like Fred Johnson has switched across to...
Yeah, Fred Johnson, was there something happened to him? Matt Pryor came in as a right tackle. He was with the 49ers a couple years ago. He can play pretty well guard and tackle, and he's right now playing as a right tackle for Fred Johnson.
So changes to that offensive line, but the 49ers are struggling with their pass rush this season. A tight end moves from left to right. 2 receivers Devontae Smith left, AJ Brown right in the gun, fakes the handoff this time to Barkley, throws it looking for AJ Brown on that far side. First down, Eagles inside the 20, inside the red zone for about a 9-yard gain, and they'll call that 1st and 10 from the 17. I'm Will Gavin, alongside me Alfredo Gutierrez, former offensive tackle of the 49ers, former roommate of 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy, giving us his insight. He's been fantastic so far, and you can catch us on the TalkSport USA YouTube channel, where you can watch this commentary along live from Philadelphia. In the gun, Jalen Hurts stomps his foot, hands the ball off to Barkley, no, fakes it, rolls out to the right-hand side, he's under some pressure, finds his tight end right around the 15-yard line, maybe a 2-yard gain on that one. Dallas Goedert with the catch. He missed that game last week, but he's wrapped up by Sam O for a short gain. In fact, Bryce Huff on that side making the tackle.
I think Aaron Kendrick's right there playing pretty well. He was a good add for this defense, since we're pretty well. 49ers is pretty hurt in that corps. So Aaron Kendrick's right there making a good tackle.
This is the best red zone offense in the NFL in terms of conversion. 31 touchdowns on 44 trips to the red zone. They now have 2nd and 6 from the 13. Hurts in the gun, has Barkley, looks away, toss play to Devontae Smith on the jet sweep, cuts back upfield, wrapped up by the 49ers and tackled out of bounds for about a 3-yard gain. Ball gets down to the 10-yard line. It's going to be 3rd and 3 from there. If San Francisco can stop the Eagles and hold them to a field goal here, that would be huge. But you know, if they gain a yard or two, then you know we're in tush-push territory.
I was about to say that. When you're like a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, it's really tough to stop this offense.
49ers lining up 4 down rushers. Jalen Hurts has gone 5 wide. Barkley has lined up behind AJ Brown on the right-hand side. In fact, comes to join Jalen Hurts in the backfield lineup in the offset eye. Devontae Smith to the left, Jahan Dotson that side as well. Hands the ball off to Barkley, makes the man miss, steps up to the left, gets past the tackle and gets to the 1st down, Philadelphia. It was a hard-fought 1st down from this superstar running back, but he gets inside the 10. Garrett Wallow in on the tackle for the 49ers, and it's going to be 1st and goal from the 7 for the Eagles.
Right there, Barkley following his the offensive lineman backs, finding the gap to run and keep the feet moving. You can see him right there, moving and hitting the... Arthur Collins actually is playing pretty well.
Yeah, right, that's what you can hear over on TalkSport 2 now. And, of course, Saquon Barkley being pivotal. And you heard about his great run there. It's probably set up a touchdown chance here for Philadelphia. He was the most important player in their team last season, along with the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. He hasn't had a great season by his own standards this year, but doesn't mean he can't do it in the playoffs. Saquon Barkley. And you can hear full commentary of that game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Make sure you tune into TalkSport 2 right now. Thanks to Will Gavin there, particularly. Andy, about a minute to tell us about Villarreal, because they beat Alaves 3-1. It looks like everyday business for them, but they're getting goals from all over the pitch, and they are the real deal.
Yeah, they really are, Danny. Now, they had to make the most of the fact that Real Madrid and Barcelona were, and to a lesser extent, Atletico Madrid were off at the Supercopa. So they beat Alaves 3-1. They did it in great style. Alberto Melero, who I think will get in the Spain squad for the World Cup. He's that good since coming across from Las Palmas. 8 goals for him this season. But you've got Gerard Moreno chipping in. You've got George Mikatadze chipping in, both in this game. They've now got 5 each this season. You've got 5 from Tejan Buchanan. You've got so many different options there scoring goals for them. And if having won this, they're now they've got another game in hand, which if they should win, they'll be 1 point behind Real Madrid and 5 behind Barcelona. Just take that in. That's an absolutely incredible job by Marquinhos. By the way, I just want to add, it was great to hear from Will Gavin there. I think he'll be speaking more of my American sport language next weekend, because I'll be at NBA London between the Grizzlies and the Orlando Magic, and I think Will will be there too.
Yeah, he loves it, doesn't he? Listen, thank you very much indeed. My star of the week in Spain, attention fans of West Ham United and West Bromwich Albion, is Grady Diangana. I know, a fixture over the last half a decade or so at the Hawthorns. These days, applying his trade, if I might use that cliche, for Elche. He got his first goal for the club against Valencia. And, it was a brilliant left-foot shot. They didn't win the game, Elche, but they didn't lose either, and they are doing very, very well. They're still in the top 10, which nobody would have expected. I just enjoyed saying the name of Grady Diangana for the first time in about 18 months. Who's your star of the week, Andy?
Mine's going to be Ilyas Chaira of Oviedo. The Moroccan scored a goal for Oviedo at home at the Tartiere, which I think is worth underlining, because even if it wasn't quite good enough for a win against Betis, which would have been epic, Giovanni Lo Celso equalising quite near the end in that, it's the first time they'd scored at home since the middle of September. Only 3 goals at home this season. The other 2 were good enough for 1-0 wins. Not this one due to Lo Celso, but they're still just about in touch at the bottom there.
Okay, Andy, thank you very, very much indeed. And that, my friends, is what you call a flying first hour of Trans-Europe Express. More to come in just a few minutes' time. Don't go anywhere else. Stick with us here on the mighty TalkSport.
The Ryder Cup. Unique, euphoric, unanimously loved. Here's the history and some of the key numbers behind the contest that grips the world of golf and beyond like no other. The first edition was held in 1927, where a Great Britain team arrived by boat to play in Massachusetts at the Worcester Country Club. Originally, the competition comprised of 4 foursomes and 8 singles, with 4 balls not introduced until 1963. In the first 22 editions, when it was just Brits and Irish against the US, America only lost 3. So, in 1979, in came the rest of Europe, including the future 5-time Ryder Cup winner, Seve Ballesteros. Since Team Europe was established, the head-to-head reads Europe 13, USA 9. Home advantage is a big deal. Europe's last away win was the miracle at Medina in 2012, and America hasn't won on European soil since '93 at the Belfry. It's accepted that both teams tailor their home courses to suit their own players. For example, in Paris in 2018, Thomas Bjorn asked for the rough to be kept extra long beyond the green to target the big booming American drives. 10 years earlier, Paul Azinger did the opposite and the Valhalla rough was trimmed right down. On both occasions, the home side were resounding winners. So what about the money? The most recent Ryder Cup in Rome drew in a record 271,000 spectators and boosted the Italian economy by €262 million. In the US, the PGA America TV deal with NBC is worth $440 million. But no Ryder Cup revenue has ever gone directly to individual players. That's until now. In 2025, for the first time ever, the US team will each receive a fee for playing in New York. Of course, in Rome, legend has it Patrick Cantley refused to wear his cap because he wasn't being paid to wear it, though he insisted it simply didn't fit. Either way, Team Europe have made it clear they're more than happy to keep playing for the sheer thrill, joy and prestige of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, welcome back everybody to the second hour of 3 of tonight's edition of Trans Europe Express. I'm Danny Kelly. With me for the entire ride, I'm delighted to say, Andy Brassell, and of course your good selves. We love having you along for the whole journey. During the course of the next 60 minutes, we'll tell you all about what's been going on in Italy, the rest of French football away from the Super Cup final. We're going to have a team focus on Benfica. And Jose Mourinho. I won't spoil it for you. You'll want to hear what he's up to now. And we'll have that listener Q&A. We need to get your questions into Andy, please. 81089 on the text is the best way. Text your questions now to TalkSport on 81089, and Andy will try to get through as many as he can between 11:15 and the top of the hour. Welcome back one, welcome back all to Trans Europe Express. Well, Andy, that huge game at the top of Serie A has ended. As I explained earlier in the show, no matter what the result was, we'd be right. But our headline is to do with Gasperini. We'll get onto him in a minute. It's gas, but on the edge of the volcano. But we must start with that big game tonight, which could have seen Inter Milan take, if not a chokehold, then certainly some control over the top of Serie A. That's not how it's finished.
No, Inter 2, Napoli 2. Inter led twice through DiMarco and a very, very hotly contested Çalhanoğlu penalty. Equalisers both by Scott McTominay, keeping Napoli in it. And it sort of felt to me that their away form has let them down at awkward points of this season, Napoli. But despite the fact that Antonio Conte was sent off for protesting vociferously to the fourth official after the award of that penalty, and yeah, it was given for a foul by Rahmani on Mkhitaryan. It felt to me a little as if Mkhitaryan ran into him, and clearly that was the feeling on the Napoli bench as well. But after that goal, they could have caved. They didn't. They came back. So what I'm going to do is, it feels to me as if the only league in which we read through the top of the table is Italy. And we're going to keep it that way because it's so exciting.
For good reason.
Exactly, Danny. So here we go. Inter, the best team in the land, as we have discussed, top 43 points. Milan 40. Napoli 39. Roma in fourth, having played a game more, 39. Juventus 36, Como 34, and a sort of semi-resurgent Atalanta won 3 games in a row. They beat Torino 2-0 this weekend. They've got 31.
It is a fantastically competitive league, as it is every season now. We need to make that point. We'll get on to Roma and their rise up the table in a second, Andy, but and perhaps connected to that as well, because they're looking for a centre-forward, I know. You expect Serie A to be the busiest of all the big leagues in the current transfer window. Maybe not splashing the most money, because, of course, the Premier League will be throwing money around like drunken sailors, but you expect the Serie A to be very, very busy.
Yeah, and I mean, we're at the stage at the moment where a lot of these clubs and a lot of the executives at the biggest clubs are having a lot of lunch together. And that's what really happens. You know, you get the biggest clubs get together in a way that they wouldn't really in any other league in Europe. And they discuss what their mutual needs are and ways
that's
around
fascinating.
that. And yeah, that's how it's been for a really long time. Now, bear in mind, the idea of clubs splitting economic rights of players between them, that's no longer allowed co-ownership in Italy. But I think really that tells us a lot about the Italian spirit in the transfer market. And think that you can think of any number of players that have played for Inter and Milan, a few that have played for Roma and Lazio as well. The idea that, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And if the money's not there, and that's particularly been the case, of course, post-Calciopoli, so in the last 20 years, they've got to find a different way to do things. And this is going to be the same in this transfer window as it is in any other. You get swaps in Italy more than you get in any other league, because there's a sense of, you know, we've got to find the marginal gains in this transfer market, because we can't just throw money at the problem. And that will happen all over again. Now, I think if you look at the needs of those teams, the biggest need for Inter is at right back. Of course, they hope to seal that deal for João Cancelo. They didn't get it done because he's agreed to go to Barcelona instead. So they're looking for someone to replace long-term injury victim Denzel Dumfries. But really, everywhere else, it's strikers. Milan are looking for a striker. Roma are looking for probably 2 strikers as well. You look at the injuries at Juventus at the moment, with Vlahovic out for the medium term and Jonathan David and Lois Openda not really firing, despite the fact they've got so many enviable forward players. They're probably looking for a centre forward as well. So I think a lot to happen, particularly in the last 10 days of the market.
Yes, and you mentioned there Roma on the lookout for strikers, and we'll come back to them later on in the transfer roundup, no doubt. But they're having a very good week. They've won twice this week by 2-0. But their winning is not the issue, Andy. They're not drawing enough, are they? They're an interesting team, and that they're a completely binary team. They either win or lose.
Yeah, that's it. So 20 games, 13 wins, which is more than anyone apart from Inter, but 7 losses, which is more than anyone else in the top half of the table. So
amazing.
They've clearly got an issue there. If they go a goal down, they tend to lose, really. That's something and they need to sort out. And they've lost games that they should have got something out of this season on a number of occasions. Now, this is clearly why we've said Gasp is on the edge of the volcano, is because he feels as if he's due an explosion. He's been asked a lot about it this week, especially as we know that a move for Giacomo Raspadori, formerly of Napoli, who of course has gone to Atletico Madrid, is pretty close. But close isn't over the line. And every time Gasparini's asked about it now, he's like, please don't ask me about that. You're driving me absolutely mad. Now, as we'll discuss it in a minute in our Stars of the Week, he's not the only manager in Rome that's been driven completely mad by journalist questions at the moment. But he didn't want to speak at all after the game against Lecce in the week where they won away on the road 2-0. And they beat Sassuolo 2-0 yesterday. Because it's that sense of, I think he knows that if I go out there, I'm going to say something, and I don't want to say something. So it was assumed that he was boycotting the press conference, the after-match press duties against Lecce because it was a protest against the Roma board. But he said, no, it wasn't that. I just didn't want to get asked stuff, which is a good way to avoid it. It's funny, actually, because in that game, actually, in the week, Evan Ferguson scored again. He's having a good little mini run. And funnily enough, even though he's been on the end of some quite unfair criticism from Gasperini, which we know he's a great coach, we also know he's often in the wrong when he falls out with players.
Sure.
I think Ferguson's done really well to just keep his mouth shut, get on with it and improve his form. And with him, we know from watching him in the Premier League, it was always going to take time. The idea that he was going to be your number one option and magically make everything click, it never made any sense to me. So the current situation with Evan Ferguson, and it looks like Roma will hold him for this window. Artem Dovbik's more likely to be the one on the move. It was never Ferguson's fault. All he ever needed was time. And now he's getting there. Well, it'd be interesting to see what he does do in the second half of this season.
One of the reasons why Milan are not closer at the top of the table to their city rivals, Andy, is because they drew with Fiorentina. And Fiorentina are having a mini revival. I don't know if it's caused by the impending arrival of Fabio Paratici from the USS Chaos at Tottenham Hotspur, but they are having had a. I mean, let's be frank about it. They're still in the bottom three. They've had a dreadful start and early medium part of the season, but the last few weeks they've just managed to pick themselves up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Both Fiorentina and Milan drew 1-1 today, and in terms of repetitive behaviour in the week, we've had the same sort of thing in this week from Milan and Fiorentina. So Milan got a really late equaliser from Rafael Leao against another lowly side, Genoa at San Siro in the week. And then it took Christopher Nkunku scoring in the 90th minute to get them a draw at Artemio Franchi today. Funnily enough, straight after that, Fiorentina had another couple of really good chances. Moise Kean having a great save made from him by Mike Maignan, and then hitting the crossbar as well. Brescianini hit the crossbar as well. And given that Fiorentina have had a week where they led against Lazio in stoppage time, and they led against Milan in the 90th minute and only ended up with 2 points out of that. You'd think that's a bit of a downer of a week. But actually, 2 successive wins followed by 2 draws against good opposition, that's decent. That's getting them back into a spot where they're serviceable. And the performances have been good. Now, look, Paratici will still be busy this month. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Presuming it is Paratici, of course, it's not official yet. Could be someone else that's making the decisions. What do we know? But... far be it for us to suggest there's been a little bit of, gentle consultancy working from
overlap.
From home.
Shall we call it overlap for the sake of argument? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, the good thing for Paratici is because Fiorentina have got themselves in a position where they've started rattling out some results and started rattling out some performances, he doesn't have to fire the coach, because that's something he definitely could have done without. Bear in mind that Paolo Vanoli is their second coach of the season, having already gone through Stefano Pioli. So going back a couple of weeks, we were talking about all the different options of where they could go coach-wise, but that's something that he doesn't have to deal with, thank goodness.
And Andy, we'll do our stars of the week, and then Manchester United fans might want to open their ears wide because they got some updates, albeit speculative, on the situation at Manchester United, even regarding an interim, never mind a full-time manager. Who's your star of the week then in Italy, Andy?
Maurizio Sarri. Not so much for guiding Lazio to victory at Verona today, but having had a massive gob off in the week where he moaned about the imminent selling of Matteo Guendouzi to Fenerbahce, saying, I thought we were going to build the team around him, and saying he hadn't even heard of the replacement that Lazio had signed for him. Not ideal coaching that, perhaps. He said when he was interviewed pre-match, he was still absolutely raging. He said, having me here talking to you is like violence against me. Can we please get this over quickly? I suppose you can kind of make allowances for him because he's recently had a heart operation, but Oh, come on, let's just get him a nice cold drink.
We're seeing this more and more, Andy. That press conferences, managers don't like them because they're being asked questions that are really outside their pay grade. They're being asked about the purchase of players who they have very little control over. We saw it with Amorim. We're seeing it with Thomas Frank. They are staring. They say, you don't want to ask me about that, and then they kind of swivel their eyes upwards towards the boardroom. It's a really interesting way in which the game is changing. My star of the week is a lovely story. Eduardo Bove was a Roma Academy product, speaking of the Roman side, eventually loaned to Fiorentina, and there you'll remember we talked about it. He had a cardiac arrest on a pitch during a game, and he's been fitted with an internal defibrillator. Now, of course, that is not allowed in Italian football, so it looked like his career was over. But Roma have let him go from his contract, and he's all set to sign for Watford, because defibrillators, as we saw with Christian Eriksen, are allowed in the English football pyramid. And he was at the Stadio Olimpico at the weekend saying goodbye to the Roma fans and got a huge reception from them. It was all very emotional. So my star of the week is Eduardo Bove. Now, Manchester United, this is the latest from TalkSport, and it's to do with the timing of and the person who's going to be the interim manager of Manchester United. I'll read it verbatim. Manchester United are set to make a decision on their new interim manager on Monday. TalkSport understands. Well, that's an hour and a half away. Michael Carrick and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have both held face-to-face talks with the Old Trafford hierarchy. Solskjaer was originally viewed as the best front-runner to make a sensational return to Old Trafford, as TalkSport reported last week. However, following the interview process, Carrick is now seen as a strong contender to be handed control until the end of the season. Current caretaker boss Darren Fletcher's chances of being kept on will not help by Sunday's FA Cup third-round defeat at home to Brighton. TalkSport understands that Manchester United want to make a final decision on Monday in time to give the coaching team maximum preparation time for Saturday's game against Manchester City away. So that's the very latest on that. And if I was going to be the caretaker manager of Manchester United, I'd want to avoid being given that game to do. I'd say, no, I'll watch that one from the stands and we'll start next week. You're listening to Trans Europe Express. Now, I know this is one of those moments in European football that is among Andy's favourites, and indeed a favourite as well with Lee Davey, who helps us prepare the programme, because, Andy, it's the Coupe de France is back in full swing this weekend. It's one of your favourite. It's your favourite competition because everyone takes it seriously. There's always great upsets, though perhaps not quite as much as the holders being knocked out by a six-level team as we had in the FA Cup this weekend. And with no disrespect to Crystal Palace, what an amazing football match that was. But I think we should start with two notable debuts in the Coupe de France. First, Endrick's debut for Lyon, and then we'll talk about Gary O'Neill's debut as coach of Strasbourg. Let's talk about Endrick first.
Yeah, and it finished tonight in northern France. Lille 1, Lyon 2. Lyon through to the next round. Endrick did start, despite Paulo Fonseca rather mischievously saying he probably wouldn't in this game. I don't know if he got a quick call from Florentino to go before hanging up. But it wasn't him that opened the scoring in the first minute. That was Alfonso
Moreira. He probably just
Moreira.
WhatsApped him the contract, you know?
Yeah, probably. Alfonso Moreira opened the scoring after a massive mix-up at the back early on. Endrick hit the post in the first 5 minutes. Despite Lyon dominating at that point, Lille equalised after another goalkeeping blunder from Remy Descamps. Both teams playing with their second-choice goalkeeper, of course, as is normal in the Cups these days. Nathan Ngoy equalised. But Endrick, his very own Brazilian striker, scoring in the 42nd minute, just before half-time. Lovely finish after being beautifully set up by Corentin Tolisso. He played 70 minutes in the end. Lyon had to hang on a little bit at the end, but they are through to the next round. And Endrick scoring the winner on his debut.
When we were doing the list for our poll, you can go and vote on it on X-Stroke Twitter now about who is currently the best player in Europe. You couldn't believe that Tolisso wasn't on the list. Now, let's talk about the game at Avranches, where they took on Strasbourg. Look, you can tell me the result in a second. It was a resounding win for Strasbourg. This is an amazing chance for Gary O'Neill, who's been given the coaching gig there.
Yeah, it is. And the early signs are of someone very pragmatic who's got his head screwed on. Now, I think it's worth pointing out that whereas Gary O'Neill may be a familiar name to us, basically no one in France has heard of him.
Exactly.
And you might remember from Liam Rosenior's opening press conference with Chelsea, he said that was exactly the same for him when he arrived at Strasbourg. So a similar situation, I suppose. And he's come in and he's ambitious, but I think smart and aware of where they're at the moment. Now, of course, they've been on a poor run. Liam Rosenior took 9 points from his last 10 Liga games. And they were going into a game away at Avranches against a fourth-tier side, but a fourth-tier side who'd knocked out Liga opposition in the last round. They knocked out Brest in the last round. So big banana skin up there in northwestern France, quite near Saint-Malo. Avranches. So it had, Coupe de France banana skin painted all over it. They went there and won 6-0. And the way that they dealt with it, the way that they played, the way that the players committed, and the fluidity, they just looked a miles better team. And it just underlined, really, just take it seriously. If you go into a lower division team, fight for your right to play. It's the most obvious of cup cliches. But they did that. And they played with a bit of arrogance, a bit of swagger as well, which I think is entirely justifiable in the circumstances. Good performances from Joaquin Panakei, Valentin Barco, who we know that Rosenior is interested in for Chelsea. He set up the opening goal for Panakei. Goals for Martial Godot as well. One for Julio Enciso, who had a very good game too. And they played really smart football. And the things that O'Neill did that worked, he picked exactly the same team as Rosenior picked for the last Ligue 1 game, which I think is sensible while he gets to know his players. So it was a strong team and a team that was familiar to each other. And I think if Liam Rosenior did a lot right at Strasbourg, but where I always had a little bit of doubt, and of course, maybe this was with an eye on Chelsea in the future, who knows? he always sort of protected the business model at all costs, really. And for someone who's, a very admirable, intelligent guy, outspoken on a lot of social issues, whenever the management of the club was criticised, or the way that the club was run was criticised, or the identity issues of the club were brought up, he always stood up for his paymasters. Whereas I think the way that O'Neill put it was really interesting when he was asked about it afterwards. And he said, look, I understand exactly where the fans came from. I've been there. When the club is everything to you, it's your everyday, you've every right to get upset and have your opinion, because I was like that with Millwall when I was a kid. So I understand where they're coming from, but we're just going to try and make them happy. We're going to try and get up the table and win the Coupe de France and win the Conference League. And that, to me, seemed like a really sensible answer, respecting the supporters whilst respecting the position of the club at the same time, which is not easy to do. But in one answer, he did something that Liam Rosenior, I felt, never satisfactorily did while he was at the club.
I'm just laughing there, Andy, because I've got one eye on the game in the NFL. The wind is really good. The weather's not good in Philadelphia for this game against San Francisco. But at the side of the either side of the touchline where the teams are set up, they have these blue tents so that people can get medical attention on the sidelines. One of them is just blown away like a trampoline in suburban England because of the wind. I see some police officers have now arrested it and putting it back in place. My star of the week, Andy. Oh no, I don't want to do stars of the week. Yeah, you'll tell me about the other upsets if there were any in the Coupe de France, but you've got to tell us the story about the Angers versus Toulouse match, where if I say there was a coin controversy, it doesn't begin to do it justice, does it?
No, not really. And, referees have been under a lot of pressure recently in France. There's been talk from senior players, sporting directors, presidents, coaches about maybe forming some sort of all-party group to have a look at the standards of refereeing. So this, at the end of Angers-Toulouse, before they proceeded from the game to the penalty shootout, was probably the last thing that the referees needed. So Marc Bollinger, who was the referee, he had a coin that was blue on one side and yellow on the other. And he said, OK, if it goes blue, it's going to be to my at the end to my left, and if it's yellow, it's going to be at the end to my right. Okay, and so he flips it, and it goes blue, and then he points in the other direction, and he goes, "It's going this way." And the captain of Angers, Louis Mouton, said, "That's not what you said. You said the other way round." And Bollinger sort of leaned into him with a very patronising look on his face, went, "No, I didn't. I didn't."
Oh, so he just doubled down on the mistake. How brilliant.
He absolutely doubled down on the mistake, which obviously was on television and has now been shared on social media like hundreds of thousands of times.
Good to hear that Mouton wasn't sheepish about that decision, Andy. My star of the week in France is Jonathan Klaus, who set up a goal as Nice knocked out Nantes in the Cup on penalties. Klaus was one of those players who thought he was going at the end of his contract, coming to the end of his contract, thought he was going to Leverkusen. That fell through. Then he picked up an injury, which his manager thought, or his coach thought he was faking. So it all looked very grim for him. He was one of those players who was attacked in that disgraceful incident when the Nice coach was attacked by their own fans. And then out of the middle of all that chaos, he went and signed a new contract with the team from southern France. And he was, as I say, influential in their victory in the Cup, in the French Cup this weekend. So he's my star of the week, Jonathan Klaus. Who is yours?
My star of the week. Well, I'm going to go for two, actually. I'm going to go for two teams. You talked about the shocks. Well, there were a few shocks, but the possibilities of shocks. And on Macclesfield weekend, I have to go for the fifth-tier teams that had a really good go at knocking out top-flight teams. So we have to go for Haute Lyonnais, who are from Lyon, as would be suggested. Now, they were playing Lorient, though, without their three best players, who were all suspended, which made it tough enough to make up the 4-division gap. They were leading 1-0 for quite a long time before Lorient came back and won 3-1. Similar thing happened to Chantilly, of course, famous for the cream and for the horse racing track and all the rest of it. just outside Paris. They were 1-0 up against Rennes for a really, really long time. Then they went down to 10 men, and Rennes scored from the free kick and went on and won 3-1 from there. So really unlucky, both the players of Haute Lyonnais and Chantilly.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Equally unlucky, the players of Benfica. That is next here on Trans Europe Express when we talk about that great Portuguese club.
Super Bowl 60 on TalkSport.
Yeah, our latest competition has landed, and this is your chance to be at the greatest show on earth, the Super Bowl, on Sunday, the 8th of February. As well as a pair of tickets, we're chucking in those flights to San Francisco, 3 nights accommodation and spending money. They're all covered. Listen up, here's how to enter. For your chance to win, just text that word WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or you can call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 22nd of January 2026, obviously at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's are at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text WIN to 83338. Do it now and good luck, everyone. Yeah, it should be quite nice weather in San Francisco that time of the year. Sometimes they're in those northern cities where you have to take your fleece with you. Andy, we're moving on now here on Trans Europe Express to one of our team focuses, and this time it's Benfica, because I'm going to make this noise to set the story up. That's not because I expect what you're going to tell us to be so boring, but it is about sleeping arrangements at the mighty Benfica.
Yeah, I was going to say, Danny, I've not even really started talking about NBA, despite the fact that the two teams from next weekend, talking of early nights, are being allowed to play the early games, the Magic and the Grizzlies, so they can get a bit shut-eyed before they fly to London tomorrow.
So you brought it up then. I understand you're traitoring us all up next weekend and doing the basketball rather than Trans-Europe Express.
I'm making sure there are sort of input of high quality in between the European football bits. That's what
I understand that we're having a massive upgrade and Kevin Hatchard is coming to play, so that's good.
Yeah, there we go.
Tell us about Benfica, fella.
I will. So I think it's interesting because the actual action itself, that of course we had the Portuguese League Cup this week, the Taça da Liga. We'll talk about the final later, but what it is a Final Four format that has been reprised because the Taça da Liga has been doing it for a while in a lot of Super Cups now, where they have a semi-final and then a final, all played in the same place. So in Leiria, in northern Portugal this weekend, they had the final on Saturday, having had semi-final Sporting against Guimarães on Tuesday, and the other semi-final, Benfica against Braga on the Wednesday. Now, look, especially with Porto not being involved, runaway leaders in the Liga, everyone assumed it would be a Lisbon derby, Sporting versus Benfica, on this Saturday. It wasn't that, because Sporting managed to dominate Guimarães and concede a couple near the end and go out, quite surprisingly. But Benfica Braga was a different kettle of fish. Benfica were terrible. They went a goal up early on, but they lost 3-1 in the end. They deserved to lose. They were really rancid, having played quite badly in the last Copa game against Atletico in the first half of that as well. Mourinho had something to say. Now, of course, the fact that he lent on his Italian stock with Inter and Roma and took the players in retiro, so didn't let them go home and took them into a training camp at the training ground at Seixal and made them sleep there, was not necessarily a surprise. But when he talked about it and said, I don't want the players to sleep, I want them to be awake and think about what they've done. That was
he made the point that he wasn't
going
to be able to sleep after the defeat, so why should they? I mean, he's a one, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and but I guess the question is, will he get the response that he wants out of the players? Now, it's a really unusual situation where you've got a guy who has taken over Benfica in a difficult place, obviously, because they sacked Bruno Lage in the middle of September. Mourinho came in, and as he's pointed out, he could have earned more money sitting on the sofa, still getting paid his Fenerbahce salary than he is at Benfica. A controversial appointment at the time because Rui Costa was still up for election at the time. We didn't know whether he would continue as Benfica president, as he actually has. And at this point, on paper, you look at it from a distance, you think, okay, well, Benfica are still unbeaten in the league. What is there to complain about? Well, there's a lot of draws in that. And the fact that Porto have gone off in record style, of course, only dropped 2 points in the first half of the season. Get your head around that. It's a record for an 18-team league in Portugal. 2 points they've dropped in the first game of the season. And that was against bus parking Mourinho Benfica. Going back a couple of months.
Moral victory for Jose, yeah.
Yeah, a moral victory for 15 years ago, Jose, absolutely. And I guess it sort of really underlines the fact that he is under a little bit of pressure. Now, we'll come to whose fault everything is in a minute, but I think throwing down the gauntlet to your players, I mean, this is something that he's done throughout his career, of course, and he's locked horns with more high-profile players than Benfica's current lot. But will it work? And we're going to find out, I think, only in the next little while. Now, the next big game is a Portuguese Cup quarter-final away at Porto on Wednesday night. Now, bear in mind that Porto are absolutely flying at the moment. Bear in mind that Francesco Farioli has done such a brilliant job they've extended his contract today. I mean, in the Livraria Lille, which is the most famous historic bookshop in Porto, him and Villas-Boas did the signing. It was all very Harry Potter and all the rest of it. Shows you what a good place that Porto are in at the moment. Not only do they really have to go to Porto and get a result, but then, of course, after the league game, they've got Rio Ave next weekend, which isn't easy either. They've got Juventus away in the Champions League, and then the week after that, they've got Benfica, Real Madrid going to Benfica in the Champions League. So he has got some absolutely massive games coming up in the next 3 weeks. And, draws won't be good enough. Draws won't be good enough.
He also has, Andy, I think, hanging over him, the shadow of one Ruben Amorim. Now, we know that Amorim was the hugely successful coach of Benfica City rivals, Sporting. But, people might say, well, that surely debars him from being Benfica manager. People shouldn't forget he was a player at Benfica back in the day.
Yeah, and you could argue, Danny, that as he was a player that sometimes wasn't in the Benfica 11, that suffered a lot of injuries at Benfica, a little bit like another Portuguese who learnt his trade as sort of in the dressing room but not always playing, Nuno Espírito Santo. Ruben Amorim kind of made his base as a coach at Benfica when he was still a player there. Of course, he was offered the B job before that. So he is someone who Benfica has had a massive influence on his career. Of course, again, we've had coaches at Benfica and Sporting in the past, notably Jorge Jesus in the fairly recent past. So it can happen. It's always been sort of widely understood that Mourinho will probably go at the end of the season. Mourinho and Benfica can both walk away from it at the end of this season, and maybe that would be the right time for him to take over as Portugal coach after, no doubt, Cristiano Ronaldo grinds Roberto Martinez into the dirt in America and Mexico and Canada this summer. But I think it would be a sort of sad end to, or possible end to, Mourinho's club career if really this were to be it. Like, if it didn't last till the end of this season. And, I actually have some sympathy for him. I know people find it difficult to have sympathy for him, but really, he risked his reputation, or what was left of it for, I guess, people in the English-speaking world, by taking this job, because he could have put his feet up. He could have done a cushy little number in Saudi. He could have carried on collecting the Fenerbahce money. He could have done any of those things. And he went back to the one place where he's got almost unconditional support to put himself fully under the spotlight in an potentially unflattering situation at the helm of undoubtedly the biggest club in the country. Now, come on, I'm not making excuses and blaming it on the refs yet. I will be.
Andy,
I will be.
I wasn't being rude there. I need to bring this section to an end because we're going to get the queue of your questions up next. But that's the highlight of the week in Portugal. Benfica players forced to sleep away from home by Jose Mourinho. Yeah, the latest episode of the How to Win the World Cup podcast is live now on YouTube and on all available podcast platforms. Matt Ford and comedian Paul McCaffrey are joined by 2002 World Cup winner Kleberson as they discuss managing the expectations of a massive nation in the world's most prestigious tournament. That's How to Win the World Cup podcast, available now on the TalkSport app or at your favourite podcast provider. So, Andy, we asked for people to send in their questions for you. I'll join in if I've got anything to add in that unlikely event. But they poured in. First one, I've got to be very careful with this one. This first one is from Amanda, who's a Sporting Lisbon fan. Sporting, she would say, no doubt. Said, Thomas Frank seems to be under continuous pressure at Spurs. If he was to leave Spurs, where could you see him managing in Europe?
I think it's a really good question. And straight away, I think I guess with the fact that with Spurs, style has not been off the scale since he's arrived there. Perhaps potentially in reaction to what went before with Ange Postecoglou. I guess Serie A would be interesting. I think that would be really interesting to see him take on a big team there. Like, say, if you look at Juventus, for example, if you look at, I know that Serie A is a lot more attacking than it used to be, but yes. I think when we look at the fact that Juventus only winning matters, I think if you look at the fact that Milan have taken on Max Allegri, if you look at the fact that Napoli have taken on Antonio Conte, and if you look at the fact that Roma, despite having signed Gianpiero Gasperini this summer, are playing very, very sparse football. I think it's quite an interesting change of things at the top of Serie A at the moment. So maybe we could see Thomas Frank taking on a Fiorentina or something like that. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think Amanda's question was where would suit. And that's something that springs to mind, I think.
Okay, well, I have no inside knowledge on this, but I suspect that may be a more open question for Thomas sooner rather than later. But again, from what I hear, the Spurs hierarchy are going to stick it out with him. We shall see. David's an Ajax fan, and he says, what are your thoughts on Erik ten Hag returning to Dutch football as FC Twente's technical director?
Confusing.
Me too.
Because he was someone who was always a coach, quite pure coach, and a coach who felt the need for a solid technical director around him. Now, I guess what he can offer arriving at Twente, because he knows exactly what he as a coach would want from a technical director, so maybe he can help in that sense. But to me, seeing as it felt like he was a coach looking for the right project, that he's gone on and taken the role that really is the role that he wanted to be supported by, is a little bit of a surprise for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is by no means the end of his road, but he's far too young to be giving up on the coaching yet, despite his experiences, which must have been exhausting in Manchester United. We mentioned Ruben Amorim just a second ago, but Bruno, who is a Benfica fan and maybe is tugging at our coats here, says, which club would you like to see Ruben Amorim manage next?
I mean, I don't really want to see him go back to Portugal just yet. I can see why Benfica would be a fit, as we spoke about in the last section, obviously. I think when I was talking extensively about the issues that Mourinho had, Amorim would have some of those issues as well. Maybe he would be able to play a back three there, but I think the issue that any Benfica coach has at the moment, be it Mourinho or anyone else, is you're taking on players who are absolutely knackered. Because we can talk about the amount of games that Chelsea and PSG have had to play. Of all the European, as I've said on here before, of all the European participants in the Club World Cup, Benfica, with getting to the last 16 of that competition, and then having to start early in the Champions League qualifying rounds, they played more games than anyone else, and they look it. I think Mourinho has actually done quite well.
That's why I think he's needing extra sleep, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think you should have given them a couple of days. But I think maybe they're overtired. Maybe that's the issue. That's what we always say to children, isn't it, when they're not sleeping? But I think that is the physical limitations they have is a problem that any coach is going to face. And I think Amorim knows better than... I don't think he'll take anything for the rest of this season. And I don't think he should take anything for the rest of this season. Because he took United mid-season against his own judgment.
Yeah.
And then from there, it went bad. So, look, I think instinctively I would love to see him take on a Spanish club. But having said that, most of the big jobs there are taken. And if you look at clubs where you could see him going in, Valencia, Sevilla, big clubs that he could really turn into something, they don't have the money to match his ambitions. No. So there's not really an obvious spot. But Marseille after De Zerbi goes?
Which, of course, with De Zerbi could be any minute. You can never tell. Now, I'll forgive you, Andy, if you don't know much about this player, because you can't know everything. But Matt's a fan of Brentford. Wow, 5th place in the Premier League. How good is Brentford's new signing? He says, K. Furo, who they brought in from Club Brugge. Do you know anything about him?
Yeah, I think with Furo, you're going to really find out about him in a year or so. He's not going straight into the Brentford team. He's a big, powerful striker who has made a decent first impression. But
he's not going to replace their current centre forward, is he?
No, there's no doubt about it. But if you look at the development of, say, Igor Thiago, if you look at the development of Kevin Schade, they're almost stash picks, really. They arrived at Brentford and then they weren't put under pressure to play straight away. Now, I suspect that Furo is there to take over when either Schade or Igor Thiago is sold, because Furo's not even started a Belgian league game yet for Club Brugge. Of course, it's a big club with a lot of expectation, but still, he's 18 years old and he's got very, very little experience at a first team level. So whether they loan him out or whether they want to get him completely used to the way that Brentford play by keeping him around the squad, we'll have to wait and see. I think the latter. And I think, like I said, he'll replace either Igor Thiago or Kevin Schade when they go.
Okay, and finally, Andy, the fiendish Matteo, who's a Juventus fan, wants us to play the start, bench and sell game involving Serie A central defenders. And the 3 names he's picked are Alessandro Bastoni, Fikayo Tomori and Pierre Kalulu. Start, bench, sell, Andy.
Are you going to give me your 3, or do you want me to? I'll tell you what. Last week you went first, so why don't I go first this week, and then you can react to that. Yeah. I am, perhaps surprisingly for some, I'm going to go for Kalulu first to start, because I think he's the best pure defender out of those. He can play right back or centre back. He's progressed so much over the last couple of years, so I'm going to start Kalulu. I'm going to bench Fikayo Tomori, perhaps controversially. Again, his Milan career saved by Sergio Conceição. He's been much improved this season. We know he's a dogged defender, much improved with the ball as well in attacking situations. And Bastoni, I feel, has gone a little bit backwards over the last little while. A prince on the ball. I think if we're talking in terms of pure talent, he's the best of the 3. But for me, sell.
Okay, well, that is contrary to what I would say, because Bastoni has so much going on for him as a ball-playing centre-half in a world where those things are, much treasured. I suspect a change of scenery wouldn't do him any harm. But
Danny, you don't need to butter him up anymore. You've got Mickey van der Ven.
Yeah, well, Mickey, of course, he's going around with a ferocious bad temper just now. I'd start Bastoni. I hate this because I love Fikayo Tomori, but I'd have Kalulu on the bench, and I'd be forced reluctantly to go to one of those lunches with other Italian directors of football and say, you can have Tomori if we can have X, Y or Z. So thank you for that terrible, terrible, convoluted question, Matteo. We did not appreciate it. One little bit more to come. Still another hour to go on Trans-Europe Express.
Who would have thought a sporting event's halftime show could have a bigger impact than the game itself? Well, the Super Bowl halftime show does exactly that. In 2024, Usher brought in an audience of 180 million worldwide, the biggest ever in the event's history. But how did singing and dancing get to be the centrepiece of America's biggest sporting event? The first edition of the Super Bowl was held in 1967, when the Green Bay Packers beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Los Angeles. Because of the sheer size of the event, organisers wanted to put on entertainment at halftime for the fans in the stadium. It was a display of marching bands, dancers and pure USA patriotism, and that was the theme that followed for years. In the 1980s, the Walt Disney Company got involved and we started seeing some interesting and questionable displays. But we got our first glimpse of halftime shows to come in '93, when none other than Michael Jackson stunned fans with his 15-minute medley of his own smash hits. When he walked out on stage, he had to wait for the crowd's cheers to die down for about 2 minutes before even starting his first song. Diana Ross, Gloria Estefan, Phil Collins all starred in their own shows, as did Aerosmith, who performed alongside NSYNC. Things got a little bit out of hand in 2004 when Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson produced perhaps the most famous or infamous wardrobe malfunction in history. Shows from the likes of Prince, Lady Gaga and Beyoncé are considered by critics as the best. To give you an idea of the scale of things, Rihanna's 2023 halftime show included roughly 800 people. These ranged from backing dancers to stage crew to camera operatives broadcasting to millions around the world. The whole stage for that show was built in roughly 8 minutes and was broken down and cleared away in the same time.
Yeah, welcome back everybody. It seems incredible we've already got 2 hours in the rear view mirror, but still an hour to go in this edition of Trans Europe Express with me, Danny Kelly, and Andy Brassell at the controls. We've got a lot to get through in this hour, including we'll be joined by Tony Afoki from AFCON as that tournament heads into its semi-final stage. And you'll have some transfer talk for you at about 11:30, and then we'll go around the leagues. Great stories for there from Turkey and elsewhere. But we will start, as we always do, with all the latest from South America. Welcome one, welcome all to the final hour of tonight's special, well, not special, they're all special, episode of Trans Europe Express. Yeah, so this is the moment when we go via the miracle of modern technology to South America and say hello to Tim Vickery. Good evening, Tim.
Evening, gentlemen. Is it any wonder that confidence is low in the Man United dressing room when they're playing for someone called Fletcher, who's got twin boys, and he didn't call them Norman and Stanley? How can you have any confidence in someone like that?
I blame Mrs. Fletcher. Surely that was discussed in the Labour ward, and if she poo-pooed that idea, disastrous. Tim, we're about to talk to after we've spoken to you, to Tony Afoki, who's live in Morocco covering the AFCON for us, a tournament that is causing particular interest in South America.
It is, yeah. I don't know how many Fokies they've sent over to have a look, but it's fabulous preparation ground for the World Cup. 3 of the South American sides will kick off their campaign against African opposition. So, this is, it's first game. And so this is fabulous. One of them is Ecuador, whose last game in the World Cup was the vital defeat against Senegal that knocked them out. First time out this time is against Ivory Coast. So I'm sure they've had a long look at Ivory Coast and what they've got. Argentina will open up their defence of their crown against Algeria. Based on what we saw yesterday, you can't really see much chance of Algeria doing what Saudi Arabia did to them in the first game, in the last World Cup, when they really surprised them with that really brave high line. It was fabulous, I thought, what Saudi Arabia did. It was such a big risk, but they got away with it. But you just wonder. I look at some of these African teams, and Algeria is certainly one of them. And the idle is almost a problem, isn't it? They've got Mahrez there, and he didn't do very much. He hardly did anything. But he's not going to track back. He's got this idle status. So obviously that's the weak part. You know, the space behind him, which is where Nigeria got their opening goal, and maybe Senegal is a little bit similar with Mane. Egypt have found a way to do things a bit differently. They've got a 3-5-2, so Salah doesn't have to run the entire line, so that they can get the best out of him by limiting the amount of space. And the other South American country who kick off the World campaign against African opposition is Brazil, whose first game against Morocco looks more intriguing by the minute.
Yeah.
Because on Morocco now, it's fabulous for Brazil. They're up against a really impressive Nigeria team. You know, how on earth did that team not qualify for the World Cup? But one thing I thought, Morocco, the coach, he's obviously functionality. There's not a lot of frills, there's not a lot of bells and whistles, but it's a really there's no problem with idols there. Everyone has to do their role. And the thing I thought was really impressive about them against Cameroon last time out was the central midfielder Baleba was having a really good tournament for Cameroon. Morocco just pressed him out of existence. You know, that high press, they just went whoosh at him, and he couldn't get into the game at all. Now, whether they'll be able to do that in the heat of the summer in the States, I don't know. But certainly if you're Casemiro, you're thinking, well, I'm in for it today, you know. And Ancelotti will have to work out. And the Nigerian centre-backs didn't really do it very well. They didn't really give options to play out and just, you know, patiently be able to play through the press. Brazil, I think, with the centre-backs will be able to do that a little bit better. But that's clearly a threat that Ancelotti and his playing staff will have had a long look at, and have another opportunity to have a long look at on Wednesday in the semi-final.
Tim, with that in mind, perhaps Brazil could do with an extra attacking weapon. Of course, the Lyon debut of Endrick tonight, electric from the start, scored the winner. Paulo Fonseca has said he's still got to get a bit fitter and a bit more used to us, but an incredible first impression. It's going to be a fun 6 months, I think.
Certainly is, yeah, and that's why he's done it. That's why he's left Real Madrid, where probably he shouldn't have gone in the first place. So, how do you say no? You know, when Real Madrid come knocking. But there was the problem that he was joining at the same time as Mbappe. And I don't actually think Ancelotti wanted Mbappe. Don't think he wanted him. He worked out a way that his side functioned without that centre-forward, with Vinny having his best season, Vinny Jr., attacking that space. So Endrick was, you know, he was always onto a loser because he was surplus to requirements. And I do think maybe at the highest level there's another... And I feel bad for a lot of today's strikers, because in systems, you know, 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, they have to define themselves, whether they are the 9 or whether they are a striker in wide spaces. You know, the old 4-4-2, a lot of strikers who would have operated in a 4-4-2, you think, well, what would happen to them now? What would happen to Bebeto now? You know, where would he play? How did Lyon set up to use him, Andy?
Just as a central striker. So they don't really have a central striker of note. So that's why it's such a perfect move, not just because of the Brazilian connection there, but the fact that all he's required to do is hold those central positions. If he wants to drift wide here and there, then fine. But really, just put himself in a position to score goals and get shots off. And that's what he naturally wants to do. So they couldn't be more suited to each other's current situations. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, although he does like to retreat a little bit and advance with the ball. And also, obviously, physically, he's not the tallest. So, you know, so I wonder about him long term as that out-and-out 9. But we shall see. I mean, he's a very, very young player with stacks of ability. He's also very intelligent, I think. And all right, he's been treading water at Real Madrid, but I'm sure he's been listening and learning, because that's what he did at Palmeiras. He sought out the key professionals who had things to teach him, and he listened to them. So I'll be interested to see how he's sifted through all the advice that he's been receiving among the gods there at Real.
Yeah, actually, while we're on Vinicius Junior, Tim, you brought up before, and the fit between him and Mbappe. It's funny because when he originally arrived, I think you're right about Carlo Ancelotti, because I think he, like everyone else, saw it as a tactical quandary because they like to occupy similar spaces on the pitch. But how it's turned out over time, it's not been about tactical space. It's been about psychological space, really. It's really, I think, affected Vinicius Junior's confidence, the fact that he's not the main guy anymore. Maybe a little bit like a later coming of what happened to Neymar at Barcelona, although, you know, you could argue that Neymar, even as a teenager, could have gone in with his eyes open. I thought it was interesting, though, tonight that Vinicius Junior had his best game in a really long while when Mbappe sat on the bench. Now, of course, I don't think we're going to go back to a point where it's Vinny's team. It's always going to be Mbappe's team going forward, but there's probably a little bit of a sense of what could have been.
Yes, and there are a few alarm bells ringing about him in Brazil, and some people are worried about what they see as a Neymarisation of Vinny, and something which I think is really interesting. And Ancelotti has stressed this now twice. He's gone out of his way to stress this, that he does not want anyone in his World Cup squad who's harbouring any thoughts of being chosen as the world's best player. Doesn't want it. And I think that's fascinating, because that would seem to be a clear message to Vinny, his mate, you know, who they've worked together so well. But all of that fuss about him missing out to Rodri and all of the nonsense that went on around it. And Brazil lost points because of it under the previous coach. And Ancelotti is trying to nip that in the bud. I think partly psychologically and also tactically, because the only way that his system will work is if Vinny and everyone else are prepared to run backwards.
Tim, when the group stages ended in the World Cup qualifiers, the sort of playoffs seemed like a distant thing in the future, but I can assure you that here in the Republic of Ireland, I'm suddenly very aware that they're coming down the pike at an enormous rate. So the one team who have in South America who have got this these qualifiers coming out is Bolivia. What are they doing to prepare?
They've got friendlies this month. I mean, they're just meeting up today. They're playing, and this should be of great interest to England. They're playing Panama on Sunday. They're hosting Mexico the week after. And the really good news for them is they've got their best player back. He's a midfielder. Andy might know him from his time in Belgium, Ramiro Vaca, who strikes the ball wonderfully well. Really, really good strike of the ball. Now, the problem with him was, middle of last year, he failed a drug test. It's one of those altitude things. Had he taken a substance to help him cope with altitude, or was it just contamination? He picked up an 8-month ban. So he was missing from those last stages of the World Cup qualification process. He's back now. How fit he is, I don't know, but they've got him straight back in the squad. And that's very, very important for them. The results in recent friendlies haven't been particularly good. They haven't scored in a while. It's a very, very young side, Bolivia. But they do think, and they're up against Suriname first, and then Iraq if they get through that one. And they do think that they're capable of doing it. They haven't played the World Cup since '94, the last time it was held in the United States. That time they had a really good generation and weren't disgraced at all, although they were eliminated in the group phase. This time they're not as good, but the generation that's coming through, I think, is interesting, and they will be, I think, boosted by the return from this suspension of Ramiro Vaca.
And Tim, if I might move on then, because the most famous Cristiano Ronaldo would dispute this, but Lionel Messi has done an interview, and he doesn't do deep dive interviews very often. I think he's done one that you could almost describe as intimate.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing. It's some streaming site, whatever they may be, and you know players, don't you? You know them through watching them. You get an idea of who they are. Messi, I've been watching him now for 21 years, and I really don't know him. You know, I really don't feel.
I agree.
And so this was fascinating, this interview that he gave. And he did refer to himself in terms that I cannot share with your immense listenership, but he found a way to refer to himself as very, very strange. He's an oddball. He likes being on his own. It's a bit hard for him, I think, to be married with 3 small kids. Charging around the house, chaos everywhere. He likes order. You know, he does seem, and what he's saying about himself, he's on the verge of obsessive compulsive.
Wow.
It's it's really interesting. I mean, I've never seen him speak this frankly. He talks about a little bit of wine and Sprite now and again. He likes some of that, and that's the only way you'll ever get him dancing. Because he won't do it without, he needs a social drug, the social stimulant, to get up there and get down with his bad self.
So, Tim, to clarify, do the wine and the Sprite, are they taken separately or together? Is this a twist on Calimocho?
No, this is get them in the same glass.
Yes,
get them making friends with each other, and then that's what he needs.
It sounds disgusting, but I'm going to try it later on.
Indeed, breakfast of champions.
Yeah, I mean, if he is. The way he described himself there, I guess that his freedom comes then, his mental freedom, his open spaces are on the football pitch. Finally, yes. Tim, I love to hear this story because I'm sure you're going to roll out the details. A footballing yo-yo, Gerson.
Yeah, I mean, Andy will have followed this player. He's a central midfielder, left-footed, and a very good one. But he has now been to Europe from Brazil 3 times and come back 3 times. The first one, the obvious move that they all make when they're kids, he went off to Italy, to Roma, and didn't really come off then. Came back to Flamengo, had a great time, got in the Brazil side, went off to Olympique Marseille, and that didn't really work. Back to Flamengo again, and then probably the surprise one, because he was in the Brazil team at the time when Ancelotti took over. And after the Club World Cup, he went to Zenit in Russia. And that's not a move that anyone could understand, because he was giving Ancelotti an excuse to drop him. And there is a big reason for dropping him, which is, for all his talent, he's not really a central midfielder. It's been hard, I think, to find a position for him. When he plays higher level central midfield, I don't think he doesn't move the ball quick enough. He's one of those who always wants to pirouette first. I think the best position that's been found for him is higher up the field. And he now comes back, most expensive player that a Brazilian club have ever signed. He signs for Cruzeiro in Belo Horizonte. The coach who's just taken over there is the former national team coach, Chichi. And this is going to be interesting. This is a late attempt to crash into Brazil's World Cup squad, where if they can't get away with playing 4-2-4, he becomes a contender there to be the third man in midfield, I think. But quite why he moved in July, I really couldn't make it out.
Me neither.
And I think
Me neither.
Yeah, and one thing that's clear now, at the age of 28, he ain't going to be back no more. You can't have him again, Andy. You've had him 3 times. You haven't got the best out of him.
Tim,
He's ours now.
We've got to go to a break, but people won't forgive me on a certain podcast if I don't ask you very quickly, have Spurs got a good player in this youthful left-back they've signed from Santos?
Like him very much. Really good player. Came through a baptism of fire with Santos fighting against relegation last year. He's very young. He didn't play all the games. He often didn't play the full 90, but he's strong, he's quick, he can defend, he can attack. I think he's a very, very interesting player, but not one, unfortunately, that's going to change the fortunes of our club on his own.
Okay, well, I think you probably need 6 players to change the fortunes the way things are going at the moment. Thank you very much, Tim Vickery from South America. We're going to Africa next. We'll be going to Morocco. Tony Afoki, who's done such great work here on Trans Europe Express and on TalkSport, covering the AFCON, will tell us about the upcoming semi-finals, which on paper at least look delicious. Yes, you've heard me wanging on about the NFL playoffs have started, and later this morning we have another live game for you over on TalkSport 2 as you can listen to the New England Patriots who go to the LA Chargers. Live NFL on TalkSport 2 from just after 1 a.m. That's live NFL on TalkSport 2 just after 1 a.m. Okay, we're down to the important, the crux of the matter in the AFCON. Joining us from there, as he has done throughout the tournament, we're so grateful for his work, Tony Afoki. Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, guys. How are you?
Good. Really, really good. Now, Tony, this is very unusual for AFCON because I think it's fair to say that and it's unusual in this tournament, as I mentioned, the four best squads on paper, the four best teams on paper, have arrived in the semi-finals, which is very exciting, I think, for the tournament. Let's talk first about the game between Senegal and Egypt. How have they got there and what do you expect to happen?
Oh, well, I do agree with you there with the four best squads, but if you're asking Mo Salah, he doesn't think that his Egypt squad are the best squads because he came out after their round of 16 game and said that, you know what, a lot of these players play in Egypt's local league, but despite that, Egypt have reached the semi-final. I think the best squad on paper is Senegal, and Senegal have really looked good this tournament. Egypt, they've done a really good game against Ivory Coast, even though they were playing in the low block, but when you have the likes of Omar Marmoush and Mo Salah, it just shows that you can go to anywhere. And this is the thing, I've as I said earlier in other previous shows, I've grown up watching Egypt dominate AFCON, and even though they've not really dominated this tournament, they put themselves in a really good position, and especially for Mo Salah, with everything that's been going on with him in Liverpool, if he can deliver this AFCON for Egypt, I think that will cement his legacy as one of Africa's greatest ever players. So I'm really looking forward to that one. And
it's interesting, Tony, that the coach has found a way to deploy Mo Salah. It does not require him to run up and down the touchline as he has to do in the Premier League. He's got more of I might say, a Messi role in a 3-5-2.
100%. Salah is a part of that 3-5-2, and maybe Arne Slot should take a couple of notes of Hassan's book at the end of the day. But I feel like it's playing to Mo Salah's strengths in the sense that Mo Salah, even though he got the winner against Ivory Coast, he's had a good tournament, and I think it's really helped him as a player because I think before he came to the AFCON, it was all the talks of him not running back, and Egypt said, you know what, we know what you can do for us, you don't need to run back. If we play with a 3-5-2, you, Mo Salah, you do what you need to do. So maybe Arne Slot should take some notes out of Hassan's book.
Tony, how are Algeria feeling after this? I mean, they've looked one of the best teams in this tournament, and then they came up against Victor Osimhen and everything changed.
This is the thing. I was at the game in Marrakesh. I'm currently in Marrakesh at the moment. And when I spoke to a lot of Algeria fans, the fact that they gave nothing to Nigeria, I think that's the real thing that hurt them the most. Algeria looked really good this whole tournament. Lucas Zidane, the son of Zinedine Zidane, literally conceded one goal the whole tournament, but you come up against the likes of, I think, the best front three in this AFCON so far with Akil Adams, Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman playing in the 10. You come up against those three and something's going to happen. I think Algeria, even though they may not have been favourites against Nigeria, and they showed that they weren't favourites, I think the fact that they didn't get a shot on target on that game, that's the thing that really hurt the Algerian fans the most. But when I spoke to them, they said at the end of the day, the best team won. I know there was a bit of pitter-patter after the game with the likes of the referee, but you can't take that away when you can't have a shot on target. That's down to the team and nothing but the team.
Tony, while we're on Akil Adams, actually, I wanted to ask you about him because obviously Osimhen is the headline act, and there's no doubt about that. He's had a bit of a rough time in Europe over the last couple of years, playing for a Montpellier team who are one of the worst in Liga in the last couple of years. Then getting that move to Sevilla, kind of out of the frying pan into the fire, really. But he has looked intermittently good for a really quite average team. Is this really the sort of tournament that could give him the platform to get a move to a really good team and making the sort of progress in his career that perhaps his talent merits?
100%. I think what he's shown in this AFCON, even though he's not been the main man, and I think a lot of teams in Europe nowadays, in football nowadays, you play with a number one striker, but Akol Adams, he's played alongside Victor Osimhen, and I did ask him that in his first game, and he said, you know what, he's learnt a lot from playing alongside Victor Osimhen. I feel like Nigeria's side, they tend to just create the chances for Osimhen, and Akol Adams has to do a bit of the dirty work. I can compare it to Weekend Sports Breakfast presenter Tony Cascarino and Teddy Sheringham, in the sense that one's got to do the dirty work and one's got to get the goals. And even though Akol Adams been doing the dirty work in the front too, he's still come up with some crucial goals. He got the second one against Algeria. He scored against Mozambique too, and Akol Adams has got a couple goals. So I feel like if people look at his moveset and see what he's good at, he could get that move from Sevilla to another big club. And I think this tournament he's doing the platform to do so.
Which takes us, as you say, the road really hits the rubber now in that second semi-final, where the tournament hosts and pre-tournament favourites Morocco come up against a Nigerian squad that we are bewildered they haven't qualified, Tony, for the World Cup. This should be a monster game.
It should be a monster game, and I can't wait for Wednesday in Rabat. And when I spoke to the players yesterday, I spoke to Fisayo Delibashiru and Semi Ajayi as well. And one thing I've watched a lot of Morocco games, and personally, I don't think Morocco have played that well. I think they really played well against Cameroon, but one thing I will say is that the Moroccan fans willed them. And I know 65,000 of those Morocco fans are going to be in the Prince Moulay Hassan Stadium willing the Atlas Lions to that victory. But one thing I will say is that as a Nigeria fan, this is the best I've ever seen Nigeria play for a long time. Performance-wise, I've never seen Nigeria take it towards teams. When they got into the AFCON last year, it was Jose Bazirio played free at the back, and it was more, let's get 1-0 and shut the shop up. But one thing I will say, if Nigeria have a chance to win this, they need to take it to Morocco and silence the crowd, because if that Moroccan crowd gets that noise and gets behind the team, I think it can be a long day for Nigeria. But from what I've seen so far, and bias aside, I think Nigeria might be the favourites.
And who will they meet in the final, Tony?
Senegal Egypt is a tough one. It's the replay of the 2022 final, and I honestly don't know, because I thought Ivory Coast has been one of the underrated teams, but Egypt had a really good performance. Marmoush got an early goal and Salah got the winner, and when you have those two, I think anything is possible. However, Senegal do have on paper with the likes of Iliman Ndiaye, who got the goal for Senegal in their quarter-final. I will say Senegal, just because Egypt were in a really low block against Ivory Coast, and I think if Ivory Coast had more time, they could have got that equaliser. However, to do that against a Senegal team with the likes of Nicolas Jackson, Iliman Ndiaye, and all those other players, I just think that might be a bit too tough for Egypt. So I'm going to go Senegal.
Well, it's fascinating. We could have an all-North African final. We could have an all-Sub-Saharan final. We could have a mixture of it. You could have the host. And it's just a fantastic lineup. Thank you. And no doubt we'll talk to you again next weekend about what actually happened, Tony. Tony Afoki there, live. Did you say he was in Marrakesh? It's a tough old life, isn't it, being a football reporter? Spending the evening in beautiful, mystical Marrakesh.
transfer window. Breaking news on TalkSport with Intuit QuickBooks. Tackle your self-assessment with Intuit QuickBooks. Search QuickBooks to find out more.
Yeah, Andy, we're going to do some transfer tittle-tattle very soon, and there's some magnificent stories. I don't know whether they're made up or not. You'll be able to tell me a little later. But one or two of the games tonight, and there weren't very many games, but there were big games, producing interesting post-match quotes that I think you want to bring to our attention.
Yeah, that's right. Firstly, from Rafinha, who really has been on fire since he's been back in the Barcelona team over the last month. Marcus Rashford did nothing wrong in the first part of the season. He was really good, but Rafinha has really underlined the fact that he's not going to be in the first 11 now when Rafinha and Yamal are fit and that Rashford is cover. Again, Rafinha talking about everything that's changed in his career in the last year and a half. This was him after scoring those 2 goals that took them to the 3-0 win in the Super Cup final, a 3-2 win in the Super Cup final against Real Madrid. He says, I always say that it's Hansi Flick who's changed everything for me. I was on the point of leaving the club. I had a foot out the door already. He came and spoke to me and said that he wanted to count on me in the team and I would be an important player for him. I think that's exactly what a player needs. Every player has the need of his trainer having trust in him to do his work, and he gave me the confidence that I needed at that stage, which is interesting because, of course, you know, I never talk about the Ballon d'Or as you know, but that he finished 5th in it last year was ridiculous. You know, he was so good, maybe even Barcelona's best player last season. Endrick hoping to have a similar impact, of course, for Lyon while he's on loan there. He said afterwards he scored the winner, of course, in the Coupe de France game against Lille tonight. He says, I feel really good here, a lot better than even I imagined. I can speak a bit of English, which means I can banter with the team in the dressing room. Of course, a lot of English speakers in there. He says, I feel at home already.
Yeah, important. I think they got that winner because it settles him in. And you're right, he could make a late run in a Brazilian squad that's got plenty of talent. Their results haven't always reflected it in recent times, but he could easily find himself in that Brazilian squad for the upcoming World Cup. Let's take us to the latest, transfer rumours, Andy. We might as well start with Barcelona then, because Marcus Rashford has done well there. As you say, he may not be a starter. In fact, he won't be when they've got their usual trident fit and ready to go. But Barcelona seem keen on retaining his services, although I'm sure that is a huge financial issue for a club that is not swimming in cash.
Yeah, but I do think he's probably the most sensible financial deal out there. He's maybe the cheapest financial deal out there. They may even loan him for an extra year. He's taken a fair hit on his wages, and if United are keen on moving him on permanently and something can be worked out, it feels like one of the best deals out there for Barcelona because they know he works there already. There's not as much risk as there would be buying a player fresh, and I think if they go out there and try and buy someone of Marcus Rashford's quality on the open market, it's going to be a heck of a lot more expensive. We've got to bear in mind as well that next season they'll probably, almost certainly, have Robert Lewandowski's wages off the books. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Aston Villa, who don't look in need of reinforcements to me, but have been brilliant at their recruitment over the past few years. Andy, this is a name come out completely out of left field. They're looking at Tammy Abraham, these days on loan from Roma to Besiktas, I think.
Yeah, and he's done pretty well this season so far in a Besiktas team that's not going to win anything this season, but he's done very, very well. And I think really what's changed him is A, that big injury at Roma, and B, the loan to Milan last year, where again he was back up, but it's really changed him as a player. Before he was a goal scorer and hard-working enough, but, you know, someone who was used to being a starter. But since he's not been a starter, he's found so many different ways to make himself useful to the team. So if you're asking me, do I think he could have impact off the bench for Villa? I don't think there's any doubt about that, really. I think he's a really, really useful squad player for them. And, of course, been at the club before.
I absolutely love this next rumour because either of these destinations will be eye-popping. Antonio Rudiger is coming to the end of his contract at Real Madrid. among the clubs that that are looking to take him on, Atletico Madrid and Chelsea.
Well, if he was going from Barcelona to Atletico Madrid, you know he'd be the sort of guy who would make them win La Liga. It is very much Diego Simeone's cup of tea. And we've spoken about it before, the fact that Simeone gets all wistful when he talks about modern Real Madrid, and has done over the last little while, almost as if some of Real Madrid's recent teams have been more suited to him and the way that he sees football than his current Atletico Madrid teams in the last couple of years. I think it'd be a really interesting move, a really, really interesting move to see him go there.
No pun intended in the transfer window, or Chelsea's current style of being. I just don't buy the idea of him going back to Chelsea. For a start, he'd be the oldest person in the dressing room by about 15 years, and they would be teasing him about how he used to use, finger dial telephones and things like that.
Teasing Antonio Rudiger, I'm sure that would work out well.
Here's an interesting one. Manchester City, having bought Antoine Semenyo, and what a fantastic purchase I think that's going to work out for them, they do seem to have a surplus of talented forward players. Dortmund love somebody out of the Premier League that they can develop further. Oscar Bob seems to be in their sights.
Yeah, I guess the question is, would this be a permanent deal or would this be a loan deal? Now, just because it might be a dry loan, that means doesn't mean it's something to be ruled out. Remember, they've already got Aaron Anselmino on loan from Chelsea, who we have to presume, there's no option to buy, we have to presume he won't stay beyond the end of the season, but they were happy to take him on, knowing it was a short-term thing. Same with Jadon Sancho, really. They knew there was no long-term in it. So Dortmund's model has shifted a little bit. I could see this as a possibility, certainly.
Okay, let me ask you then. This one is so hoary that it's almost got whiskers, this rumour. Conor Gallagher clearly isn't first choice at Atletico Madrid, but still regarded as a very good box-to-box Premier League player. No surprise then, but among those teams thinking about bidding for him in this transfer window, Spurs and Aston Villa again.
Yeah, and I guess if he's not doing badly at Atletico, but if he's going to make a run to the England World Cup squad, or at least try and make the England World Cup squad, I think he probably does need a move. Like I said, he's a valued player at Atletico Madrid, but he just doesn't have enough prominence and doesn't start enough games for him to sort of get his way into the squad. So maybe that would be the motivation around the move. The other thing, of course, is the fact that competition for midfield places at Atletico is absolutely fierce. There's been the emergence of Pablo Barrios, who's been absolutely brilliant. The fact that Koke is the player who refuses to go quietly.
He's having an Indian summer as well. He's really having a brilliant year. Yeah,
he's having a great season. If he made 1,000 first-team games, it wouldn't surprise me. That's the level that he's at. He's doing absolutely amazingly. So I guess Atletico aren't going to say, do you want to go? But if he says, I want to go, then maybe there's discussion.
Obviously, Como's progress over the past 2 seasons has caught the eye of the Predators at the top of the big leagues in Europe. Among their stars is their young Spanish centre-back, Jacobo Ramon. Needless to say, there are plenty of people circling around him as well. Yeah,
I guess the problem is, I don't know how aware Premier League clubs are of his ownership situation. So he's one of those products is not really celebrated widely enough. La Fabrica, the Real Madrid academy, and they still have an interest in Jacobo. So
he's one of those like Paz, is he, who has a kind of route back to Real Madrid?
Yeah. So I mean, wow. If he was going to be sold to a Premier League club, I suspect Real Madrid get in on the act first and make themselves a profit. But he's been excellent so far this season.
And finally, again on the matter of centre backs, Newcastle with that defender as an injury to Fabian Schär, of course, just back from a long-term injury himself, and perhaps heading towards the autumn of his brilliance as a centre-back in the Premier League. Newcastle are looking at Atalanta and more recently, of course, Italian centre-back Giorgio Scalvini. Of course, Newcastle have plenty of money normally for these transfers.
They do. Scalvini's immaculate, but he's just come back from a long-term injury himself. So whether that's the best circumstance, especially mid-season, in which to adapt to the Premier League, I have a question mark over that. One for summer, maybe, would be more sensible.
Okay. Well, the transfer window is wide open. There hasn't been much movement yet of big players, but you can keep across all this at TalkSport.com, where we're up to date with all the latest gossip and facts about the transfer window from all across Europe. You're listening to Trans Europe Express. We've got about 10 more minutes to go, during which time Andy will take us around the latest from Portugal, Turkey, the Netherlands and Dubai.
For Super Bowl 60 on TalkSport.
Yeah, this is wow. Our latest competition has landed, and this is your chance to be at the greatest show on earth, the Super Bowl, on Sunday, the 8th of February. As well as a pair of tickets, we're chucking in flights to San Francisco, 3 nights accommodation, and spending money. They're all covered. So listen up. Here's how to enter. For your chance to win, text WIN, W-I-N, to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or you can call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 22nd of January at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. It's 18 plus and UK residents only. This is a network promotion, and the full T's and C's are at talksport.com. So for your chance to win this fantastic prize, text WIN to 83338 now. And good luck to every one of you. So Andy, let's get ourselves back into the other leagues that we haven't talked about. You'll take us around the leagues for the next 9 or so minutes, starting in Turkey.
Yeah, well, it's less around the leagues, more around the cups actually this week,
brilliant.
Danny, because it was the Turkish Super Cup this week, and after the semi-finals, again, it's expanded for the first time, possibly inspired by the Portuguese League Cup, but maybe inspired by the Italian and Spanish Super Cups. I wouldn't be surprised to see these go to somewhere else in the Middle East, somewhere over the next couple of years. But all these games played in Turkey. The final played in the Atatürk Olympic Stadium in Istanbul between Galatasaray and Fenerbahce yesterday, where, of course, Manchester City won the Champions League in 2023. And victory for Fenerbahce 2-0 in the end. They played a very, very smart game, despite having less possession. I thought really good game by Kerem Aktürkoğlu, who of course controversially joined them, having previously been a Galatasaray player from Benfica in the summer. But Matteo Guendouzi scoring on his debut, having had that tearful goodbye to the Lazio fans in the week after the game against Fiorentina. He got the opening goal from distance. He did plenty of mouthing off at the referee, rolling about, all that sort of stuff that ingratiates you to the fans as well. So that was great to see. We had that. We had a second goal from Jadon Oosterwolde, the centre-back finishing beautifully, actually, with a sort of scissor kick from a corner. So a big moment for Fenerbahce. They will hope that will be the moment that will turn their season. They're second in the Superliga, behind Galatasaray at the moment. But, of course, we've got to bear in mind when the Super Cup was played right at the start of last season, Besiktas looked like they were in for a serious title tilt. They won 5-0 against Galatasaray in the equivalent of this last season and ended up nowhere near. So we'll see.
Meanwhile, in Portugal, we've already heard how the big teams managed to stub their toes and end up sleeping through. They didn't have to play in the League Cup final, which meant it was a game between Guimarães and Braga, which is a bitter local derby. And what a good and dramatic game it turned out to be, Andy.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And as we said, Braga had been by far the most impressive team of the four semi-finalists in beating Benfica. They were excellent. Rodrigo Salazar had scored an unbelievable solo goal in that game, really one for the ages. And he turned out to have a key role in this. Braga led 1-0 in the first half. Guimarães got themselves back into it in the second half, and then another late goal from Aloan Ndoye, who had scored, the Senegalese striker, twice in stoppage time against Sporting to win the semi-final. As I said, Sporting looked home and hosed in that. They were really, really good, and then they conceded twice in stoppage time to Ndoye. He got another late goal in this, but even later, Braga got a penalty. And in the end, Salazar, who'd been the hero in the semi, stepped up to take it. But Charles, the Brazilian goalkeeper, who'd had a fantastic game anyway, a little bit like Lucas Chevalier in midweek in the Trophée des Champions in France, he made a brilliant save from Salazar. You couldn't really blame Salazar for the penalty. He hit it well enough, but it was an incredible save, one-handed by Charles. And so it's said, the headline in Ebola, the Portuguese sports paper this morning, said, we're going to have to say sorry, Don Ndoye, but it was the day of King Charles.
Beautiful. Andy, just a thought on this. Just as St Mirren winning in Scotland recently, in these leagues which tend to be dominated by a duopoly or a triopoly, if such a word even exists, it is very important occasionally that the other clubs get their hands on some silverware, not just for them and their supporters, but for the blood, the strength of the Portuguese league. I mean, this is
100%.
Guimarães' third trophy ever, but it's amazingly important that these teams win these occasional competitions.
Exactly, Danny, and their first League Cup. And I think it's probably not really well known to people outside Portugal, but Guimarães is a massive club. You're talking about a town that has about 40,000 inhabitants. It's the birthplace of secular Portugal. The first ever king of Portugal was born there. And when I talk about it being a small, fairly nondescript town, apart from that, with 40,000 people in it, they have a stadium that holds nearly 30,000. and they regularly get crowds that come close to filling it, and when they play the big teams, they do fill it. Imagine 3/4 of your town going to a football match in the same stadium. It's also
Burnley
the only
style,
town. Yeah, it's the only town in Portugal that doesn't have a supporters club, an official supporters club for Sporting, Benfica or Porto, because no one supports them there.
Brilliant. So congratulations to them. Meanwhile, we turn our attention now to the Netherlands, where, let's be fair, it's the most one-sided title race anywhere in Europe. But Ajax, who have been clawing their way back, and I mean, the bar was very low. They are slightly improving. But one thing that club loves to do is to sign players, administrators, managers, coaches, etc., who have some previous connection, either by contract or blood, with the club, and they're at it again.
I mean, it's particularly notable, I think, Danny, that after Jordi Cruyff signed as sporting director, who's the first player who signs under him? Maximilian Ibrahimovic.
Amazing.
That's right. Ibrahimovic, the 19-year-old elder son of Zlatan at Milan, of course, has come through their academy. Both Ibrahimovic sons have signed professionally there. He's been loaned to Ajax for the rest of the season with an option to buy, a wide player. Having not really seen him, I've no idea how good he is, but, I think he'll have a chance of getting in the Ajax first team the way things have gone this season. Of course, with the
Andy,
results...
you've got a chance if you sign for Ajax just now.
Yeah, maybe. They're not as obsessed with young players as they used to be, it's fair to say. But look, I think the interesting thing is that with Robin van Persie and Feyenoord having a tough old run the last couple of weeks, of course, punctuated by that defeat to Celtic when Martin O'Neill was there the first time. I know that sounds weird, but that is the reality of the situation. Van Persie's on a bit of a knife edge at the moment, and Ajax are getting closer and closer to them in second place. We know PSV are going to win the league. Big win for them, 5-1 against Excelsior this week. Ajax really struggled past 10-man Telstar, although Telstar did beat PSV earlier in the season, we have to say that. But that win for Ajax and another couple of drop points for Feyenoord does mean that Ajax are getting closer and closer to that Champions League place, which, given the way it started, would not be a bad result from this season. Remember, they still haven't got a permanent coach.
And if you heard a slight crackle in Andy's voice there when he started to laugh, it's because I have now put on, because our last story features one of the great heroes of Trans Europe Express, and I am wearing, made by my sister, who's a handicraft genius, my Mario Balotelli chicken hat, because the great man is back in the news, Andy.
Yeah, he's landed in Dubai, signing for Al Ittifaq, who are currently bottom of the second tier in Dubai. Now, heartbreakingly, he is not ready to and not registered to play in the next game that Al Ittifaq have, which is against the team, I think it's Arabian Nights, that's coached by Andrea Pirlo, which would have been just perfect, wouldn't it?
And for those of you of the same vintage as me, Arabian Nights was a cartoon on a Saturday morning. Shazam! Everyone will remember what they were doing. Listen, Andy, thank you very, very much indeed. I know you're taking a week off to do the basketball next week here on TalkSport. Kevin Hatchard will be with me for the usual Trans Europe Express. Let me just tell you that in our poll, 46% of you think that Harry Kane's the best player in Europe just now. Declan Rice beat out other fools like Mbappe and Lamine Yamal. Coming up next here on TalkSport, it's how to win the World Cup. I'll be back tomorrow, very, very soon on H&J to look at all the big stories coming out of the FA Cup over the weekend. Thanks for listening. God bless you all and good night.